Hello, welcome to the podcast. I'm joined today by Doug Scott Kramer, who is an ex-member of the Church of Scientology. Thank you so much, Doug, for having me. For coming on the podcast. Basically, I really appreciate it.
Man.
It's really cool. And I'm sure that everybody sort of asked you the same question at the start. Pretty much identical question. I'm going to ask it anyway. Can you just take me? Can you take me back to the beginning?
Sure, man.
With regards to sort of before you joined Scientology, how did you get into the church? I understand it was through your father that came back, didn't he, when you were 9 years old? From what I've seen. But if you could just sort of talk me how you got into the church and a bit of a background of your family, really.
Sure. That's actually a little bit different of a question than most people ask. They usually just say get right into Scientology, but since we can take it back a little bit further, I've never actually answered that. Yeah. So from like 0 to 9, me and my parents were, I guess what you'd call, well, we were Christians. We'd go to Sunday school or whatever. So there was a religion in the family a little bit, before Scientology crept in, which I'll talk about in a second. But yeah, so we go to Sunday school. My dad and my mom, I describe them as just regular people, they're pretty cool. And despite Scientology, they still gave me a good upbringing. But at 9 years old, my dad went down to work one day, left as my father and came back a totally different guy. And he was spouting to my mother that he needed to borrow a large sum of money from his brother because we didn't have a lot of money at the time to do this new thing that he found called Scientology. So what happened is, and this is how they rope in a lot of people, my man, that back in the day, did you ever see the volcano ad, about Scientology? And then it like busts out with this volcano and it's like Dianetics,
Okay. It was an 80s advert or something, was it?
It is. So it's probably before your time, but I bet you there'll be some older listeners that will know that. And that was like, so in other words, Dianetics was kind of famous. They had, advertisements in the newspaper and on television. And it was a way for Scientology to disguise itself because Dianetics and Scientology are the exact same thing. But because Scientology had such a crappy reputation, they would often sell it as Dianetics and then bait and switch somebody into Scientology. So my dad was just, he reminisced to me about this. So I know, most of the story. So he went in there at like 9 a.m. or whatever, and he's just flipping through the newspaper. And in the bottom right-hand corner, it said Dianetics, learn how to communicate better. Do you have family problems? Scientology can fix your communication problems, or Dianetics can. Page 55, do you have relationship problems? Page 67. So because he's an introvert like me and he had trouble communicating with the family, he's a good guy, but he's kind of shut down. So that was his button, communication. He wanted to, interact better with the family. So he went right down there at the church that day. He took off work. Now here's where it gets vague because I don't know exactly what happened, but he wanted to borrow $10,000 from the brother when he came back spouting about the Scientology shit. So I assume and also he had a hypnotized, glazed look in his eye, and he was already talking in Scientology terms. He was speaking different right away. He freaked me and my mom the frick out, dude. It was really, really frightening.
You can swear, by the way, if you want to. I don't.
Okay.
I don't
care. Be careful, dude.
No,
you have to work
fine.
around algorithms and all this bullshit today. Thank you for.
I don't care about that.
Me of that. Me neither,
It's
man.
fine.
Thanks, you, man. Okay. So, anyways, my dad, comes back, and long story short, he got sold some auditing, something called life repair, probably. I won't bother you with the nomenclature at this point, but it's an expensive introduction auditing session. That's where you hold the soup cans and a psychotherapist apparently helps you out, but all they're doing is putting you in a trance and implanting false memories into you. Of course, they don't tell you that. So it's hypnosis. So he sold a little hypnosis package under the guise of psychotherapy, and he started the training routines or the communication course. That's where you stare at another person, the nomenclature goes in. This is why my dad, after having been doing this course all day, came back speaking like a Scientologist. So, long story short, bro, my mother and father argued about this for a while. My mom didn't know what Scientology was. She noticed the difference in my father, and it freaked both of us out. They contemplated getting a divorce. He said that it eventually came down to, if I'm not allowed to do this, I might have to separate from the family. Such was his desire to do it. Another important point on that, my man, is that Scientology keeps secrets and it kind of splits families apart by interceding itself in between the families. So my dad would feel comfortable and did to tell Scientology certain things that he couldn't tell my mom, and vice versa. When I got into it, I could open up completely to my auditor and tell them things that would be held in confidence. I could unburden myself like Catholic confession, and then I wouldn't have to tell my parents, and it would be all resolved according to my family and Scientology. So secrets were building up the more we got into this. But anyway, so What they do in order to break somebody down and sell them is they take them into a room after filling out a personality test, which is designed to find areas of vulnerability. And they press on that until you break down. And then they say at the very end of that, when you're reaching, as they call it, they look you right in the eyes with their hypnosis drills, which they learn in the communication course, and with malice aforethought and heavy intention, as they call it in the cult, they say Scientology can handle that. Do you want to handle that? Can you see how fixing your communication problems would help you better with your family? Can you see how if you could get over this, you'd be able to sell better and do better in your business? We can get you started today for $50. And this is the tech that will help you out. You've stumbled across something special. They really lay it on thick, and they themselves are massive believers, so they go full force on my pops.
So
this is what they did to my mom.
Please jump. Quick question. So your father came on one day and he wanted $10,000. Most people, when they get indoctrinated by the church initially, they go for an auditing session, don't they? So that there's centers that they go in for $50. So is that how it happened initially? Mm-hmm. Did he get charged $50 for an auditing, like a session? I don't think they call it an auditing session today.
He wouldn't have done here's the thing. You mostly do training and basic courses at the beginning. Auditing is a little bit too steep to introduce a new person to, unless it's something called Dianetics auditing. That's that book I was talking about earlier with the Walden books or whatever. You can pretty easily have somebody read that book, charge them. They have basic courses for like $100 where you sit down with another person at the church and you can do Dianetic auditing. But the one where you hold the soup cans, which is the life repair I was talking to you about, and the package of auditing that they probably sold my dad, it gets complex. So I'll try to keep it simple. But where you hold the soup cans that people, see often, that takes a little while to guide people into that because it's weird and it's very expensive per hour, So what the question you asked me was about my dad. What did you ask me? This is a great question.
So he said he came home one day and he wanted to lend.
Did he already pay money?
10,000. So before that point, had he already started on the very first initial stages?
Good question. Yes, he would have already paid the $100 or the $500 or the couple $100, whatever that communication course was. But he wanted the $10,000. Yeah, that's how they usually start people out. They don't normally hit somebody up for 10 grand. Sometimes they will. It all depends on how much money the person has, which they find out in that ruin finding session. That's what it's called behind the scenes, that you find their ruin. And then you find out how much money the person has. And they might try to sell them the whole bridge if a multimillionaire walks in. And that's that has happened before. But most people, bro, are middle class. They won't take poor people, but they'll take $50 from them if they have it. They'll take whatever they can get. But the ones they really want are people like my dad, who was middle class, middle to lower. But then that changed with Scientology. I'll explain later. But they just sussed, and also, since we didn't have a lot of money, it was suggested by the registrar, the person regging my dad for this package. Who do you know? What relatives do you have? Can your wife loan you any money? They don't give a fuck, dude. They'll reach out. They'll squeeze the person and find out if they can max out their credit cards or whatever. And even in the first time that you go there, they will do that because you know why? They're taught that everybody except Scientologists that are trying to get rid of it have a reactive mind. So the person that comes in, let's say you came into the church, I would already know that you have a part of your human brain that acts on stimulus response that's going to reject help and is going to reject spiritual freedom. So the registrars are taught to be more strong than your objections because your objections aren't coming from you. They're coming from your reactive mind, which isn't you. Which if we get rid of in Scientology, you'll then be free and you'll be able to think clearly like a computer. So they already feel like it's the greatest good to not let you walk out of that door. I have a video where I talk about that. They will lock the door. They're trained on how to stand up and put their hands on you and sit your ass back down if you try to leave. Yeah, it's kind of illegal.
It's a really hard sell, isn't it? I mean,
it's exactly that. But they believe in it, like I said. Oh yeah. And can you imagine a Manchurian candidate convinced that saving the planet rests on whether or not you exit that frickin' door before getting signed up for a course? That's what's instilled in these people, man.
And what would sort of happen if they thought they got a sale, for example, and they weren't quite sure, but the person then sort of changed their mind, and the door was locked. So how far would they go down that road? Would they leave him in there for a long time, or?
It depends. I mean, they push it as much as they can, but it would. They're obviously not gonna. They don't want the law on their ass. So you
Right.
can leave. It's just going to be very challenging. In fact, one of the guests that I had on recently, kind of went into detail about that and how he was going to beat the crap out of the guy if he didn't get the fuck out of the way and let him out the door. But the guy just stood there. And this is how he ended up joining staff, because he wasn't even into Scientology. He was just taking the purification rundown to handle his drug problem. And he was so impressed by the fact that this guy was willing to be thrown through the freaking window because he cared so much to have him not leave before he at least checks out Scientology more. Because that guy felt he's letting the planet down, dude, by simply letting him go about his way.
Wow.
That's what goes down there, dude.
That's how much they believe their own bullshit. It's quite incredible.
Exactly.
It's quite
It
incredible,
is.
really.
Yeah.
Can you walk me through the different levels that you need to be achieved before OT3? And OT is operating thetan level, is it?
Yes, you got it.
And so basically, is it the high? So correct me if I'm wrong. The higher level of operating theta you have, the less thetans you have, or is that right? The idea of going clear, it means are you clear of thetans? I'm kind of not an expert in this, obviously.
Hey, it's really confusing to people in general, and even trying to explain it, bro, is a little bit challenging. So I will try to not ramble on this and make it as simple as possible. Okay, so there's two sides of. So right when you walk in, they have this thing in every organization that says the bridge to total freedom. It's purposely plastered everywhere so you know what they're selling and to kind of implant it into your subconscious to get you used to seeing it. So, dude, it's like 50 some steps or whatever, maybe 30 or 40. And again, I have videos on it that actually show this whole thing and break it down. And so there's this main path on the auditing side, which is what you're talking about with the OT levels, the confidential levels. And then there's another side called training, where you learn how to deliver said auditing.
Oh, I see.
And they say that 50% of your gains are each side. So the real gold mine is the auditing. That's where you get electrified, have revelations, and all sorts of crazy shit happen in this trance. But the training also can, that's where you learn how to build up your business stats, statistics, you learn how to communicate better and all that. So they go hand in hand, but the real juice and the real moneymaker is the auditing. So when you get on that side, you start at the very bottom with something called the purification rundown. Like I said, my dad was even undercut on that. I think you can often introduce people via a thing called life repair. Auditing is a really weird thing, and it's kind of shocking for a new person. So one of the things that they have to lead people into that is a really simplistic version of that called life repair. But normally, so they'll tell you that, but the main first step on this bridge is the purification rundown. And I won't explain each one, but that's their fake pseudo, you get rid of drugs and all. It's a whole thing to explain, but it's very damaging. And they have a front group based on it too, which is called Narconom, which has caused people to suicide and kill themselves while using Scientology while they think they're getting off drugs. So the first step you do is the drug one. You go into the sweat lodge for a couple months. And then the next one is you do, it used to be, I'm going to lose you with these terms because they're part of the mind control is to start thinking outside of the English language and get used to Hubbard's words so that you can distance yourself from English and you get locked into this world via the words. So the next one is called TRs and objectives. To keep it simple, it's simply doing exercises of the auditor says, go touch that bottle. You do. Objective processes, meaning outside of your head in the physical universe. So touch things, feel things, look at things. That's the simplistic way of saying it. Since the newest cult leader, L. Ron Hubbard was the founder. He died in 1986, and David Miscavige took over. So since he took over, instead of the TRs and objectives now, they have a new version of it called the survival rundown, which is about 1,000 more hours of the same hypnotic bullshit. So you got the purification rundown, the survival rundown. Now we're already like 2, 3, 4 months deep on how long it would take to do these two things, by the way, and you're barely on the bridge. So then to cut to a long story short, there's a couple of other actions, but then you get onto what's called the grades. That's where you're really going to get into the nitty gritty. We have grade 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, each of these grades takes up a specific thing. Like, for example, grade 0 is communication. So you're going to run processes that have to do with looking back at your memories and times when you had problems with communicating, upsets with a girlfriend that you liked, all sorts of things in your memory that you will handle the trauma of, have better clarification of, and then you'll, at the end, they promise you this is the end of grade 0. And you have to actually attest to this, meaning say this out loud that you achieve this. So you get the ability to communicate freely with anyone on any subject. That's quite a claim, by the way. And at the time, I don't know of anybody that can actually do that for real. But anyway, so that's grade 0. Grade 1 handles problems. Grade 2 handles upsets. Grade 3 handles something called overts and withholds. That means things you're withholding and acts that you're committing that are bad, secrets and shit. Grade 4, moving out of fixed conditions into ability to do new things. So that's what they promise at the end of these grades. Now, this is right before you get to the infamous state called clear. There's 2 main goals that you're going for. You want to get up to the top of the bridge, but the first major milestone is clear. And the second one is operating Thetan level 3, which I'll get to in a minute. So now you've done the grades, you did the purification rundown, you did the objective processes, you're well indoctrinated, completely under the spell at this point, and probably a hardcore Scientologist. And then you do something called NED, which stands for New Era Dianetics. So long story short, you just do a version of Dianetics that is getting rid of these infamous engrams. Engrams he defines as moments of pain and unconsciousness that you've had in your life. Let's say you got drunk, you got knocked out, and people were standing around you talking. Let's say you were at a party and you blacked out. So all of that content would go into your subconscious, and according to Hubbard, that unconscious content that you've had throughout your life, including being in the womb, is what's causing your problems, causing your mind to not work properly like a computer. Because let's say you were drunk and there was girls standing around going, oh, he's ugly. Oh, look at him. What a loser. So all of that shit would you'd be unaware of it. And for the rest of your life, until you had Scientology auditing, this is so silly. You would have, I can't believe it's so funny to always relive this. So anyways, it's if you're not getting chicks and you fucking have low self-esteem, it's because when you were freaking drunk and this chick was bad mouthing you while you were unconscious. That's basically the theory, dude. How many times do you get knocked out? It's complete nonsense. But he has a whole book that makes it make sense. It's overly complicated, and he lays out that when you handle these moments of pain and unconsciousness, just a little bit more to it than that, but that's basically it. That he sells this whole thing where clear is this magical state where it's never been achieved before in history in humankind. It's what the Buddha was going for. It's like the first step of enlightenment. You won't have this mind chatter. You want to do something, you'll be able to do it. How many times do we want to do something and then our mind talks us out of it, right? So he makes all these grandiose claims, bro, about what actually achieving the state of clear will do. So you go clear, right? That's a whole another explanation, engrams and all that. So after you go clear, now between clear and what's called operating Thetan level 3, you're in what's called the danger zone or the non-interference zone, meaning these OT levels are confidential. So everything before this, you're allowed to look at in the books and you can find their references and everything, but you know nothing of the OT levels because they're secret. And again, I covered this on one of the videos on the channel where I take people up these OT levels and all the hoops that you have to jump through. You have to go through an eligibility step. In other words, Scientology is a secret society or a cult. So they make sure that they have enough blackmail material on you and that they know everything about you before you are invited onto these secret levels. Mind you, you're paying a whole shitload of money, but you still have to be invited.
And of course, that's a huge part of the auditings and sessions, isn't it? They're just keeping a big huge file on you to see whether they can put you to level 3, I suspect. And also, if we ever choose to leave the church, they've got everything written down that you've ever done that's dodgy.
Exactly. And I knew that, but they promise you, bro. I mean, it was a real shock.
They promise it's completely
against you.
They promise it's confidential, then, do they?
You believe that.
Yeah,
you sign things and everything. What they're doing is completely illegal. But yeah, I definitely believe that. And also, I was never going to leave Scientology. They say Scientology are people that don't like Scientology, the suppressive people, the people that you have to get out of your life and disconnect from. Those are people that talk bad about Scientology. Those are people that don't either know it yet or don't believe in it. So I already believed in it at this point. So I was never going to become a suppressive person. Little did I know that I was going to have doubts later on. And simply having doubts about Scientology makes you then subject to the folders being used and all that information. But dude, you have no idea that
And
that's the case.
how do you know how big so is it a physical folder that's actually kept in a
Yes.
filing cabinet?
I have multiple folders like that are that thick, dude. Like I've done so much auditing. Yes, they keep them. So I'm in Los Angeles, and I went to a place called the Celebrity Center, AOLA, which stands for Advanced Organization Los Angeles. That's where I did these confidential levels.
Yeah.
And the Ventura Mission. So there's at least 3 places that have copies of my folder, and who knows where the main ones are at. The main ones are probably up at RT. I don't want to get lost in the nomenclature. What they do is they'll make copies of it, and they have the main ones. So my shit is scattered everywhere. It could even be in England or something at some org. Who knows, man? But they definitely never get rid of that information. And yeah, they're literally thick folders where the auditor's written down in shorthand everything you ever said in the session.
I wonder if they've digitized the records, maybe.
You think they would, but bro, they're so like they can only follow, like any cult, they can only follow what the leader wrote down. So they're like stuck in the 50s still with using mimeographs and faxes and shit. I'm sure they've gotten up to speed, but they're always 20, 30 years behind the rest of the people while touting that they're the most advanced, technologically. But they might not even have them digitized at this point. I swear.
I mean, it's so bizarre. And speaking about being behind the times, I found it very convenient and very, very, very strange that when L1 Hubbard said, I think it's level 3, isn't it, where you find out the meaning behind, sort of the real meaning behind it. If you could probably explain a little bit to that.
Sure.
To me, I understand that we were supposed to be alive. Was it 75 million? It's not 75 million years, is it?
76 million years ago. I think that's what it is. I have a video of him rambling about OT3 specifically, and I put these graphics in the background.
It's in Going Clear, I think. This when he's going on about
excerpts of it are, but not the. I have the full lecture, which is a confidential lecture. It's not that you can't find it on the internet. You just have to be savvy to know where to look. But yeah, I put up the whole thing, dude.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, so just continuing on, that's a perfect place to pick it up. So the next goal is to get to OT3. Now it goes up to OT15. It says on the grade chart, 15 levels of confidentiality, but they only made up to 8. And so the Scientologists don't know that there's no levels after 8. So let's say OT8, which is called Truth Revealed, and this is the level my dad got up to, by the way. And this takes a minimum of $1 million. They say $500,000, but it's at least $1 million by the time you contribute and all the other bullshit you have to add.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you're fully committed. But anyway, so there's 8 OT levels, and the infamous one is OT3. This is the one you would see on South Park where they break down what you know. And this is the level I got to before I started to have a nervous breakdown, crack, and then I finally got out. So there's 8 OT levels. Between clear and OT3, you're said to be in the danger zone, like we were talking about before. In other words, supposedly, as soon as you go clear and you've relieved your reactive mind, you've now opened up your subconscious mind to be where it's available. What happened to you, this mystery about why the human race is so damaged, is open to you, but it's unconscious. So until you become conscious of it and learn how to deal with it on OT3, you're in danger of, as they say in Scientology, having accidents, pulling things in. Problems might start happening into your life because you're accidentally tapping into this huge trauma that happened with people here that you need to hurry up and handle. Don't try to make sense of it. I'm just telling you what they say. So you go up OT level 1 and 2. Again, I have them on the channel or whatever. They're real simple. And for me, they only took a couple of weeks. OT3 is when I was trained as an auditor how to, so the levels you do with another auditor, but on the confidential levels, most of them, not all of them, you do it solo or by yourself. So you have to train how to use that e-meter, how to tap into your own unconscious mind and write down the shit in the folder that you then return. So I did OT3. It lasted a few months and it went like this. I would go down in the morning and pick up the secret materials. I'd put them in a locked briefcase that you have to have strapped onto you with the dog leash. And then I would take them home and I would lock the door. And by the way, before all this, there was
on a dog
member
leash. So you'd have to.
Yeah, literally a dog leash. I had a dog. I mean, you could use any leash you want, but I couldn't. I was broke because I just gave all my money to do the OT level. So you can. I
Oh
just got
dear.
some cheap ass dog leash. But the idea is you can't take them off of you. As soon
Right, I
as you
see.
go to the org,
Hmm.
in the car, I couldn't take it off of me driving home. You have to keep it strapped on you because someone might come, and grab it on the street or who knows, right? You can't lose these materials. It's like you feel like a CIA agent. They say you're going to fine you $100,000 for each infraction, and you believe it, even though it's not legally binding. You sign a contract and you believe it when you're in the cult. So if someone were to grab these materials off of me, I just lost $100,000 minimum. So it's kind of like you take it very seriously. So I got the thing strapped to me with the dog leash after I grabbed the materials in the morning. I'm driving home and then I go to my apartment, lock the door, and then remove the secret materials. And then what it is all you do is while you're on the e-meter is you locate an area of pressure. These are supposedly the body thetans. I won't go into the whole cosmology, but the big secret is a long time ago, we were all of us implanted with these alien beings on us. And this is the big secret. And they're what causes the doubt. See, it bait and switches. It says it clear you're going to have no self chatter, but it says, wait a minute, the self chatter that actually is continuing because it's the body thetans that are talking to you now. So they're the ones that are causing you to make all these shitty decisions. So you have to get rid of their reactive mind. So long story short, you're holding the meter, you find an area of pressure, it drops, and then you telepathically communicate with these beings doing processes, and then you make them go away. And that's it, dude. That's somehow going to, you just waited 10 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to
Oh my
get
God.
these special powers, to read minds, to do whatever, he promises. And that's all you're doing is getting rid of beings. And somehow that's going to give you your spiritual powers. Do you jump in whenever you want, man?
Yeah. So, just a question about that. It's very bizarre. And what
You think?
what I found really strange was watching Going Clear how L. Herbert wrote about the 75 million years ago. However, they just happened to drive around in 1950s cars. They happen to just fly DC-10s that were written exactly the same year
Yes.
that the Dianetics was written, and they also wear exactly the same clothes. They all go to offices, and the problem is supposed to be is the overcrowding of the population. Was that supposed
Yes.
to be?
Yeah. Overpopulation.
Yeah.
And all the planets in the Galactic Confederation
But what I
were
find
overpopulated.
what I find bizarre is that was it not kind of obvious that a religion is being invented right in front of your eyes? And that's what I can't understand. People, I mean,
I totally understand.
myself, I'm sort of more interested in what you've got to say rather than my background. But I sort of have a
please.
a
Go back
subvert.
and
I
forth.
have sort of the opposite upbringing to you in a sense, because when I was
Oh,
when I was 9 years old, my father took me to one side and he said, I was asking him about religion. He said, "Oh, you don't believe in God, do you?" And he said, "It's all nonsense." I mean that.
Wow. You got lucky to have a good dad because
maybe. I mean, I'm sort of happy that happened. So I'm kind of. That's sort of where I'm approaching it from, and I kind of inoculated me against any kind of religion in a sense, sort of being told at a young age, but it only took like 10 seconds.
I think I would have been the same way. They had to really work on me. Dude, what you're asking is not only a great question, but it's the one that I hear the most. And it's also why I'm specifically trying to answer that question with the videos, because nobody can understand it. Here's what's happening, dude, and why I didn't question the OT3 material. Were the volcanoes around? It sounds so batshit to outsiders. What they don't see is the unbelievable amount of indoctrination, step by step by step, day by
Right.
day by day. Very, very slow, all sensible at the beginning. You're being put under without knowing it. It's so damn slow, and the indoctrination is so constant. Bro, it's 10 years and a few $100,000 by the time you get up to OT3. So even if you don't believe in it, you're probably going to make yourself, because to find out you've been conned at that level, it's hard to let that go. So that's part of it. But another part of it is because I did a video specifically with that, where I start out by saying, how is it that we can know he's a science fiction writer and still not put two and two together? So I go through how they take you through the basic shit. And another point on that is that it's made very clear in Scientology after, they show you a video where you learn Hubbard's history. And what he says is, I am a science fiction writer that has nothing to do with my creation of Scientology, that funded it. So the two are not linked together when you're in Scientology at all. We definitely know and have those compartmentalized and separate in our mind, not least because of multiple policies of him talking about this, about the way he said he was always interested in the mind. And he gives a whole backstory that makes you feel sorry for him. And he's fighting the psychiatrist and he healed himself. He was in the war and all this shit. So there's a long backstory first as to, look, science fiction is what I did to make money, but that is what allowed me to frickin' fund the thing. The two are completely mutually exclusive.
He was a pulp fiction writer, wasn't he? So in the 1950s,
the 40s,
there was a huge amount of was it really cheaply printed science fiction novels, and he literally wrote thousands of books, didn't he? But I think Dianetics was an amalgamation of every single science fiction book that he'd written. He took elements out of everything that he'd written, and Freud as well.
But it obviously has science fiction in it, especially when we're talking about the OT stuff. But like I said, another thing he says on that, which I thought made some sense, is that he says science fiction writers often tap into the subconscious. That's why they're privy to what's coming in the future, or they can imagine the future. So even though he said that Scientology is exclusive, has nothing to do with my science fiction writing, he did admit to being able to tap into some stuff by being an artist, by being a writer. But again, I'm telling you, bro, he has endless policies differentiating it. We're not learning science fiction. The book Dianetics is more like Freud. It doesn't read like science fiction at all. It reads like an exact formula on how to fix unconscious. It's literally Freud with a whole bunch of other shit added in.
You
only get into the science fiction shit later. The crossover's only later, bro.
Right, it makes sense. And he detested psychologists, didn't he? He said that he said psychology was a fraud, didn't he? Even though, but you say that he based a lot of Dianetics on
because what
Freud himself.
To make this simple, what any cult leader does, any psychopath like him, they're two-faced, and if you just flip everything around and take the opposite. No, I'm not even speaking metaphorically. That's the truth. So what they do, any cult leader they'll get there first. So Keith Raniere from the Nexium cult, for example, was a psychopath. So he would teach his followers all about how to spot psychopaths, because what's called dead agenting in Scientology, meaning if you get there, Hubbard was an expert hypnotist, a psychopath, and a liar, but he was teaching us all about psychopathy, hypnotism, and liars, because the last person we're then going to look at as a liar or psychopath is the very man who's giving us this knowledge about these subjects. So it's called dead agenting. A cult leader will get there first, program your mind to look everywhere else except for right in front of you from the guru. So that's how that works, man. He was telling us that Scientology unhypnotizes us while hypnotizing us. He was teaching us how to look out for the sociopath, which in Scientology is called the suppressive person. And there's courses on how to spot that. And he was teaching us all the knowledge of how to learn about that, but not look, like I said, at Hubbard. That's done on purpose too, by the way. Every cult leader will do that.
Yeah, don't look too close to the sun. It's that kind of.
Yeah, it's really effective, man. I got to tell you, because it really did make it the last person in the world that you're going to look at that is the person teaching you this brilliant stuff. Now, this brilliant stuff he stole from Freud and Jung and psychology and everything. But he was a salesman. He was a con artist. So he knew how to take the latest thing and steal it and then repackage it into his own shit.
And he had a completely fabricated war record, didn't he, as well? I think he was he a captain in the US Navy? He was a captain, wasn't he? But then he got discharged.
Yeah, because he had two incidences where one he fired depth charges underneath the Mexican waters or whatever, when there was nothing there. Well, he was a narcissist, and that means that he wasn't able to be controlled, and he thought he knew better than his superiors and everything.
Oh, I see.
So when he was allowed to command the ship, he completely fucked it up, and this is when he supposedly the guy was just such a liar. He said he tried to get money, after the war by claiming he lost his eyesight and how he's, had this, that, and the other problem, a lot of which he did have those problems, but not from the war, just from his own drug use and from being, just a piece of shit, basically.
He was a drug user,
But
was
yeah,
he?
oh,
Really?
massive,
Wow.
massive, massive drug user.
Despite his own church's massive objections to
That's
drug
what I'm
use.
telling you. That's part of dead
Hypocrisy.
ageing.
Right.
He tells us
Yeah,
not
yeah.
to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
No information that he's doing that. So of course we're not going to. Brother, you have no idea how much of a shock it was learning who this guy really was, and that he was taking drugs every day, and he's a black magician, and that was part of Scientology is a satanic cult, to put it in a nutshell. It really is. It's based on 95% of it is based on Crowley, Aleister Crowley, but it's hidden over and it's covered, and it's got, like I said, Freudian, Jungian shit, NLP, fucking hypnotism. It's got everything. But he loved Crowley. He thought he was Satan reincarnate. So his big kick that he got out of this shit was being able to lie to people on that level. And part of Crowley's philosophy is to take massive amounts of drugs, access the subconscious, and that's where you'll find your memories of past lives and everything. So that was part of his religion and his philosophy that he believed in, which was Crowley.
Christ.
No pun intended.
No. And it is Scientology. So that actually grew out from a satanic cult initially, was it?
Yes, that's a really long story.
In combination with science fiction.
Yes. It? Just real quickly on that, he came across a novel called, not novel, it's called The Book of the Law by Aleister Crowley when he was 15. Yeah. And that's when he felt like he discovered black magic and he was into it. And
yeah,
there's a whole long story about that. Again, I have this whole 2-hour deep dive interview with this guy named Cornell where we go into the background of Hubbard and shit. Because he joined...
by the way, you can smoke on the podcast if you want to. I don't mind. You can have a cigarette.
Oh, I don't want it. Are you sure, man? Because that's actually, I realize that's probably pretty rude, and I put it out.
No. It's cool. It's no problem.
Okay, man. Thanks.
No problem.
Okay, thanks, brother.
I let people smoke in my house, so it's fine.
Oh, really, dude?
Yeah.
Shit, and you're not a smoker yourself? That's very kind of you. Because
I'm kind of an ex-smoker, but I'm actually vaping at the moment. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate that.
No problem. It's okay. It's cool.
Yeah, black magic was his thing, and he joined many orders, many secret societies. For example, I won't go into too much depth because I don't want to get sidetracked, and it's a whole nother can of worms. But when he got out of the service, he went to Jack Parsons' house. Jack Parsons was a famous rocket scientist and closet occultist, and he was a genius. And he worked. It's a long story behind him, but Hubbard, right when he extracted himself from the Navy, for reasons completely unbeknownst to anybody, that's another long story, arrives at Parsons' house. He was renting out this mansion in Pasadena, which was a hand-me-down from his parents, from his rich parents, and he would only allow eclectic hippies, weird atheists, and occultists to frequent and stay there. Hubbard rolls in there, steals his girlfriend, learns all the secret OTO initiation rituals. So the OTO is Crowley's lodge. That's called the Ordo Templi Orientis. They had lodges in England and elsewhere. And Jack Parsons had the only lodge in America at the time near his house in Pasadena, California. Just like Scientology, it takes a long time and you have to be initiated to go up the OTO levels. That's where they get the OT levels, by the way. So Hubbard's learning from other secret societies how to create a pyramid structure where you compartmentalize information. It'll take forever for the person to get to the top, and the truth will change all the way. He learned that in other orders too, but the OTO is where he got the ideas and some of the information for the OT levels. And also because he was a narcissist and able to electrify and hornswoggle Jack Parsons and all the people there, he not only stole his girlfriend, but he was able to convince Parsons to allow him, because he was the head of the OTO lodge in near Pasadena. He allowed him to have the secret OTO levels, which would normally take years to discover, because he was able to enthrall Parsons. Parsons thought that Hubbard had an incredible magical ability. He was a massive occultist. I mean, dude, they would dress up in robes. They would have naked women dance through fire in the backyard and shit. The cops would always get called on him. He was really serious about doing certain rituals, Jack Parsons. And so was Hubbard, but he was more there to, okay, let me see all the black magic knowledge I can get. I'll grab his girlfriend as well. Show me the OTO levels. I want to, help me build a scam. And then he just took off. So,
Wow.
but it's really funny, and but L. Ron Hubbard Jr., who was his son, says the only part in Scientology that really works is that black magic. And I don't necessarily believe in that myself, but having gone up to those levels, I can tell you that you definitely tap into some dark shit, which allowed him to keep control over his flock, particularly when you get up to those confidential levels. It's very, very dark. Let's just put it that way. Sure.
So, I'm just wondering, do you think people should be actively deprogrammed as Scientologists, or at least show them an alternative way of thinking? Or do you think that that should be their own journey that they make themselves?
That's such a good question, dude. That's a great question. That's like kind of a deep philosophical question, because I've wrestled with that for so many years. Initially, when I woke up out of Scientology, I was like a chicken with my head cut off, and I desperately wanted to pass over the information to my parents, who are longtime Scientologists, about what we're involved in and what I was learning. By the way I woke up out of Scientology was in a single day, because a concerned friend from my acting class who knew Scientology was a cult dropped off a stack of books on my doorstep in January 2008. And at the very top was a book called Combating Cult Mind Control by Steve Hassan, the #1 best-selling book to get people out of cults. As soon as I saw that, my programming kicked in, and we're told that I need to go report this guy. So because I was lazy, I ended up, I'm like, I'll report him tomorrow. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's serious. This guy's accusing me that I'm in a cult. He's a suppressive person. He's my enemy. He was a friend before this. Now he's my enemy. And I have to report anybody that talks negatively about Scientology, just in that wider world. They don't even have to be a Scientologist. Anyways, I got lazy and I ended up reading it, and I was snapped out of it. It's a long story. But the point being is I immediately tried to pass this information over to my parents as I was going down the rabbit hole and in shock about how much I had been lied to by this man my whole life. I was in a conundrum, because as soon as I start trying to pass it over to my parents, they're going to look at me as a suppressive person, because now I'm doubting Scientology. I'm telling them there's some kind of conspiracy going on. We're all being lied to. And so they, so I did want to deprogram them. I needed them to get out of Scientology for me to continue on with life and to be okay. But I learned the hard way that doesn't work. So I kind of feel like yes and no on your question. Like there's really no exact answer on that. Of course, I would want people to be deprogrammed from Scientology. They're in a dangerous environment. They don't know it, and their mind's being manipulated. However, if someone, I can't think of a single person that really told me that I was in a cult. So I never really had somebody confront me on this, but I can tell you it wouldn't have worked.
I suspected that's because I'm assuming that you probably surrounded by yourself to people that weren't objectionable, people that would never have brought up the fact that
they could have, but because I was in the wider world, I was a public member. They had people that are staff members and Sea Org members. Those are the people that sign the metaphoric billion-year contracts that work 24/7 for the organization. But I was a public member, so I could go online and look at negative stuff if I wanted to.
You could.
Okay. In other words, yeah, but we don't though, bro, is what I'm saying. L. Ron Hubbard and the cult didn't need to follow me around when I was out and about to make sure I'm keeping in line. I mind controlled myself. It's a prison of your mind, and that's why when we were talking about the earlier chorus, is you're actually programming yourself. You're doing it to yourself. So nobody has to keep me in line, and I'm definitely not going to listen to what anybody had to say. So you can't actually challenge somebody directly by saying you're in a cult. Fucking haven't you seen what's on the Remedy show and Scientology? You just watch Going Clear. That doesn't work. It's the same thing as if you were trying to, I don't know, where are you, in the UK? Where are you at?
Lancaster.
I'm
in the northwest of England, Lancaster, yeah.
Meghan Markle and the whole, all that kind of fiasco or whatever. Well, it's like trying to get Harry to see that his wife is an abusive, manipulative person. He's not going to listen, even though all the information is out there. So if you go up, I tried this with my parents, you can't, of course you want people to be deprogrammed, but does it work? No. What you can do is drop seeds, penetrating questions. But I learned that I'm not trying to save anybody anymore. Like in Scientology, we need to save the planet and everybody. I've learned to let people live their lives. And I do believe that they have to figure it out for themselves. And normally, because it's too much, that's what had to happen to me. It wasn't going to matter how much people talked or whatever. That was just going to push me more into the cult if they ever challenged me on it. And since Scientology's telling you to think for yourself while the opposite's happening. I think that if you come out of a cult like Scientology, you need to pick yourself up by your own bootstraps and work it out for yourself, because your mind, I wanted to lean onto so many people when I got out, to psychologists and all that, after I got over the phobias of seeing a psychologist, and I did. And then I was, begging my friends to understand what was happening to me. I finally just said, dude, I have been so codependent to my cult leader and my parents. I have been so not able to think for myself. I need to use this opportunity to make myself work it out for myself. And that gave me, it was tough. It was a tough lesson, but it worked. So yeah, dude, I think that, and oftentimes a lot of people will leave Scientology and just go into another cult. So I just decided the way out of this thing is to work it out for myself. And so I do, and normally you only get out of something like Scientology if you've been in for a while. If something smashes you over the head, something bad has to happen in your life, or you have to be away from the organization for a length of time, which they always try to keep you connected to it, so that your mind might start reverting back to thinking critically.
So literally, it only took a few books, or one
paragraph,
book, and a paragraph of that book to read it.
Yes,
and that completely, like, it pulled the rug of your whole life from under your feet from that point,
yes.
Didn't it?
Yes.
How did you how did you cope with when you left the church, and was everybody like pretty much completely gone from your life, and how was that process for you? It must have been awful for you to leave the church and then have nobody to talk to. I mean, I can't imagine the sort of how that would have been for you. Can you sort of talk me through it, and how that's been?
Like,
for?
It's impossible to put that into words. That's the hardest part to describe. The way I describe it is, for a decade, it was like a psychedelic experience, being on acid, not knowing who I am, what my likes and dislikes are. I knew nothing about me. So it was a very psychedelic experience minus psychedelics. That's the only way I can describe it, because every day of every second of every day, including when I was sleeping, my dreams were invaded by nightmares, as would anybody suffering from PTSD. When you come out of a cult, you have PTSD. It's like coming back from the military minus being shot at. So, and by the way, real quick, the reason I was able to snap out of it so quickly is because that book was written by an ex-Moonie. And so he's talking about his experience with the Moonies and other cults like the Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff. And there's a thing called the BITE model, which stands for behavior, information, thought, and emotion. And he said all cults control these areas, and here's how they do it. So he was describing the Moonies and other cults. If he had described Scientology at the beginning of that book, I would have shut it, because my programming would kick in. Because I knew Scientology wasn't a cult. I was just reading the book as a joke, because I was bored. The books were sitting there. I was going to report this guy in the morning anyway. So why don't I just crack it open late at night? It was the fact that he could show me that what the Moon cult was doing was exactly what Hubbard was doing. So cults are run by narcissists. Another word would be a sociopath or a psychopath, a conscienceless person, which is a special kind of person. It's not most people. It puts them in a different realm. They can do things that you and I can't do because we have a conscience. So it's a fail-safe mechanism. They don't have that. So that's part of keeping him a secret, because the lies are so big, you and I can't wrap our minds around somebody actually doing that. So the reason I was able to deprogram or not go back to a cult and kind of get a lot of it right away, it's because, like I said, he wasn't showing me, Hubbard wasn't special. He's doing what any sociopath does, any cult leader does, and he just laid it out. It's literally like a playbook that these guys do.
It's like a carbon copy of Mormonism.
It really
Joseph
is,
Smith did very
exactly right, dude. Joseph Smith, Hubbard, David Koresh, all these people it's almost like they read the same playbook. So that's how I was able to snap out of it real quick. And then you asked, dude, I like each year brought new challenges. So I was integrated with my family. I was at OT3 getting to the top of the bridge, and I was just about to break into Hollywood. I finally got enough credits on my resume where I signed with a big agency. I was guaranteed to have a career. And then all of a sudden, oh my God, dude, I still can't believe it to this day. It's like living in a dream or something. It's like, it all feels like a dream. Like that can't possibly have happened. Because it's strange, brother. Like, just to get across, like, believing in Scientology, I know it looks ridiculous, but take any belief system that you can't understand that people believe in, like pick another religion, right? Well, for us that believe in that are under that spell and can't think critically, it's just as believable as real reality. So even being out 15 years later, I can snap right back into what it was like as a Scientologist, even though I'm not a Scientologist at all anymore. It took forever to learn how to speak normal and get this out of my brain, but I can still go right back to it. It's impossible to describe. This is why I try to stress hypnotism, because you're constantly kept in a hypnotic, suggestible state. And if you can access that part of a person's mind and implant suggestions, you can get them to believe in Xenu, in frickin' anything. And it will be just as believable as real reality. And you won't be able to see it or suss it because it's in your subconscious, out of your awareness. That's the only way I can describe it, because it was such a shock to learn each day the new lies about Hubbard. And I full time I spent studying this, and it took me down many rabbit holes about mind control and sociopaths. I still study to this day, man, but not as intensely.
I mean, I was really shocked to sort of hear or sort of see what he did with his ex-wife and his child. He ran away, didn't he, with his child, and then he told his wife that he'd killed his child,
cut him up into a million pieces.
Chopped up into pieces. And what a disgusting piece of shit that guy was to
that's
say
not
that to
a
his
normal
own wife.
person, is it?
No.
Yeah, then you call her up a few hours later and say, "Oh, just kidding, honey." It was a manipulation. He was a complete piece of shit, dude. Complete piece of shit.
It's kind of beyond manipulation, isn't it? In a sense,
he was the only thing that was special about him, because like we said, David Koresh, Jim Jones, they all are psychopaths, and they literally use the same playbook. But I do think he was a special kind of psychopath, a little bit. I'll give him a little bit of credit, because he was so manipulative and so clever and so ruthless that he was just extreme. He's kind of like a Hitler character,
How do you think he worked his way up to being a captain in the Navy if he was completely incompetent?
Bullshitting his way. Bullshitting his way. The same way you don't understand, man. I mean, on the world stage, these people rule over us. Like, psychopaths have a tendency to get to the top, and then everybody below them buys into their bullshit.
Right.
That's why the world's so crazy, but most people can't suss it. So it's not uncommon. These are a small percentage of people, but like, we're back to that point where I got to tell you, brother, the hardest thing to wrap my mind around is that like I said, I, and 90% of people in this world will never be able, unless you have an experience and you meet somebody like this and you shake hands with the devil and you get entrapped by someone like Hubbard. I don't think most people will ever be able to appreciate the scale of evil that's possible with these people, and the fact of what it's like not having a conscience. I just interviewed a guy the other day, and I put up a video today with a narcissistic psychopath that I interviewed named H.G. Tudor, and he's a self-aware, so he knows what he is, and he kind of spills the beans on how his kind sees things. That's like the most that's the most important subject to get people to understand. How could people fall for Scientology?
What parallels did you see between him and sort of L. Ron that he was speaking about? Did you connect any dots with that?
There's a lot, and if people that are listening, if you want to know what a psychopath is, just read Robert Hare's checklist. There's like 10 points: no conscience, no empathy. They'll do no shame, no regret. Can you imagine, brother, doing something where you do something bad to your girlfriend or whatever, or you do something really bad to your parents, and can you imagine going through an entire life without having a single moment of shame or guilt? It sounds impossible, right? Could you even imagine that, though? Think of the freedom that you would have. This is what the Bridge to Total Freedom was about. It's about crossing over from, I describe Scientology as taking a normal or an empathic person, and they have some psychopaths in there, but not what he's looking for is the people that want to help, because they're the most easy to go under, and they'll work the hardest for the organization. So I don't even know how to get it across, because Scientology is about taking a normal person and making them into what's called a secondary sociopath. So step by step, it'll delete your conscience. It got rid of my emotions. It made me able to do things that I couldn't normally do. So these superpowers were actually the power that comes when you don't give a fuck about anybody but yourself. And there is something to that, man. I'm not encouraging people to be like this. I hate these kind of people, and I hate the person that he made me into. And thank God I'm not a psychopath, so I got out of it. But if you are like that, there's a freedom that he has and that the leaders have to dupe most people, because it's simply outside of their range, brother. It's like that's what Crowley was about. It was about deleting the conscience, being able to do the most blasphemous, and to have no conscience. Because if you have no conscience, you're almost invisible to most people, and you can get away with murder, literally. And this has been going on all throughout history, brother.
Well, that was a question about the Church of Scientology I had as well. Has there ever been any murder or child abuse or anything horrendous like that associated with it? Are you aware of anything like that's happened at all, or is it, in that sense, is it one of the more benign cults in that specific set of circumstances, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm just trying to think how to answer that. Yes, there's massive child abuse. There's massive sexual abuse. Everything that goes on, like in the Children of God and other cults, it's the same thing, but on a little bit. There's definitely child abuse. There's auditors, that are in their 30s or 40s that are Sea Org members that will marry a 16-year-old, and there's all sorts of sexual abuse, just like any abusive relationship or religion or cult, right? With the murder part, most of them are not murders. They're people suiciding themselves because they can't deal with the trauma, because it's just designed to drive you crazy.
Yeah.
They absolutely do have blood on their hands, though. The problem is with Scientology, it's hard to prove that. The case that I would point to the most is Lisa McPherson, where they murdered her simply by, doing one of their own processes or on her. They wouldn't get her to. It's a gal that went crazy in the 80s, I believe, because of the processing. Stripped her clothes off in the middle of Clearwater, Florida street, and then started running. She went crazy. And also she's kind of trying to get attention. So they locked her up in a room, did something called the introspection rundown, where you can't speak to the person. You just put food under there once in a while. And they basically starved her to death, and she died a horrible death. So they accidentally, quote unquote, murder people just by applying their technology. There's been many people that have jumped out of the Flag building and other buildings, committing suicide. And yes, I can't prove it, but absolutely, if they need to take somebody out, what they do is they'll do several layers of buffering. So they won't do it directly themselves. They'll hire some shady hitman or private investigator. I know that they've done that, but like I said, I can't prove it. That's their last resort, though, bro. That's not how they normally operate. What they do is they break you. And if you want to sue them or whatever, they put you in such a state of mind. They gaslight you, harass you. They will put private investigators on you. It's called fair game. So they will, they can protect themselves without having to go to murder most of the time.
I've seen a couple of documentaries where they talk about fair game, and I find it sort of fascinating that they put posters up in shop windows, US English store windows.
Oh, you got it. I know,
and they completely try and smash the reputation with absolute sort of falsehoods or sort of fabrications of the truth that are absolutely disgusting things about people. Yeah. And that was my question to you. I assume that nothing has happened to you like that so far.
I don't think so.
It's
hard to tell, bro. When I started speaking out on YouTube, I did get threats on Reddit. Yeah. Someone said that they described my car to me on Reddit. And then I had multiple break-ins. Well, first of all, both my license plates were stolen. I had multiple break-ins in my car. But this is also during the pandemic, where the homelessness and the world went bonkers here where I live in LA. So it could have very easily, and there's some other activities that happened around the apartment, but it could easily have been homeless people living under the bridge near me. It's hard to tell what's Scientology and what isn't, but for me, I'm not high profile enough where they need to put private investigators on me or anything, as far as I know. The only threat I am to them is my parents have a lot of money, and so they wouldn't want them to lead the cult, and they don't have the manpower, and there's too many people speaking out. But dude, they don't play that way. My YouTube channel, I had 55,000 freaking subscribers, dude, and it just got taken down 2 months ago. That might in a very quick, fast way. And even though I did some things, that could have gotten me, it could be just my fault. It's hard to tell what's Scientology and what is your imagination, which is part of they play on your mind.
Do you think they could be manipulating, or is this there's some way they could have cancelled your YouTube channel? No.
Yeah, I do, because of the way it went down. I got 3 strikes in a 24-hour period out of the blue. Yeah. So yeah, I think that what they would do is they would pressure YouTube to get their shit. That's how they work. They don't have power over YouTube, I don't think. But You know, in politics, in the police, everywhere they have.
You should try and fight that, by the way.
Scientologists.
You should try and fight that.
I
Push
don't
back
give a
with
fuck
YouTube.
enough. I did for 2 months, bro, but it was
Yeah.
such a pain in the ass trying to get a hold of the copyright owners that handle the copyright claims. I wanted to throw my computer through the window because it's so many forms and crap. I couldn't actually get a hold of the people to resolve it. And the way
Right.
they took it down was kind of bullshit because they didn't even give me a week to retrieve the videos to go be able to. I had to do a whole deep dive just to find out who are the claims coming from. And it was just too much of a pain in the ass where I just created a YouTube channel, and I'm not trying to be YouTube famous anyways. So I
Yeah.
just, you know, the core people, subscribers found it again, and we'll just build it up again. Who gives a shit?
Yeah. No, that's kind of scary though, that they might be breaking into your car and doing things like that. But hopefully it wasn't them. I hope it wasn't.
I don't give a fuck one way or the other either, dude, because I'm the one that started speaking out. I know what, you know, if I wanted to live a quiet life, I'm bringing it upon myself by stirring the hornet's nest. But at the same time, it's probably not them. They don't have too much power anyways. I'm not worried.
But I think it's important for people to sort of understand and hear the stories behind the church, and I think it's really important that
Definitely.
everybody can understand in case they get approached. You know, I mean, I've
Definitely,
never
bro.
been.
That's the main.
That's the
thing
whole
I wanna
reason
get
behind
across.
your YouTube channel, isn't it? Really, to get the
To
message,
prevent
the message
people
out.
from exactly, because no Scientologists are going to probably watch the channel. Maybe there'll be a few lurkers, or it's a place where they can land after they get out and deprogram. But the main thing is preventative, just so people are warned. So the next time that someone comes up and asks them to do a personality test, they'll go, "Oh, I remember that dude's video." No, fuck you, man. Get away from me. That's the reaction I want to have, because it'll save their life.
I did have another question as well. So the e-meter, I did watch like a teardown about it. It doesn't really appear to be anything more than sort of a few components in there. I don't really know. I can't remember what the teardown video said it did actually, to be honest. I probably should have watched it.
I know what you're talking about.
But it didn't really actually do anything. So when the idea of the needle going across like that, when the needle goes across and auditing is carrying out, what is that doing, and what do they teach you the e-meter does? This is sort of three questions in one.
Okay, I know how to answer this.
Okay.
You know, I'm not going to go off on this tangent, but I want to let you know at the core of all this, because this takes us into conspiracy territory, and this is why when I get into that territory, I go really slow, and I have video galore on the channel about what you just asked. The main thing is there was a thing called Project MK Ultra that was coming out in the 50s, right when Hubbard was forming Scientology. That's the government mind control programs. Part of that was the lie detector, where they would interrogate criminals using this lie detector. The e-meter is 2/3 of a lie detector. And
it is? Okay.
The reason I bring this up is because it is detecting something. It's detecting stress. Now, it detects sweat and stuff like this. The very next video I'm doing is breaking down this entire thing from that vantage point, but it's not just irrelevant. It's used to... Now, what they say it's used for, and then what it's really doing are, of course, two different things. He's saying it's locating areas in your subconscious to address, and then you can ask it's zeroing in on areas of stress, basically. So it does register that because, and they have all sorts of, in other words, if you ask a question, when was the last time you buried your wife? Well, if it causes, right, just something to cause stress, the needle will drop over that because the hands will sweat up a little bit. So it's nothing special. It's exactly what happens in an interrogation room, which is why I brought the MK Ultra stuff up and why Hubbard grabbed that from these people. Now, in the MK Ultra stuff, this isn't just some silly device where the meter reads don't mean anything. They do mean something. And he was using, it's police interrogation technology used in the cult of Scientology. And there's all different sort of meter phenomena. There's one called the floating needle, which is what you're going for at the end of every session. They say that after you get off charge and you have a win and you relive an incident enough and the charge blows, I don't know any other way to say it. In other words, you get happy and you feel light, the needle will actually float. And that's what they're looking for. Now, what's really happening is it indicates dissociation. So when you dissociate, when you go into these auditing sessions and you're put into a trance and being traumatized and having false memories implanted to you, it's not fun. Auditing is really grueling. And what you're going for is that breaking point and that high that you get. This is what Scientologists are getting out of it, that they don't talk enough about. There is something magical happening but you're breaking someone's mind basically, which is called dissociation. And it feels like you're floating. You can often feel like you're out of your body. He reframes that out of body experience, that dissociation, as exteriorization. That's a good thing. You as a spirit are getting outside of your body, right? Now, not knowing anything about psychology, the floating needle registers when you're actually floating. Dissociation gives you a floating feeling, to put it simply. So even though those meter reads they don't do what they say he's doing. It's not reading into your subconscious. It can detect areas of stress. It can be used to interrogate you, and it can show when a process is finished, when the guy has disassociated enough in that session and now needs to be ended off. So they're not total gibberish. Those reads mean something, and they're used to guide the auditor as to where to look in the parishioner. I don't want to tell people that this thing works, though, the way he says it does, or that I believe in any of this pseudoscience, because it's complete pseudoscience. The CIA uses the lie detectors and, in interrogations to this day, but it's not admissible. It is considered a form of pseudoscience, but they still use it because it can be helpful in certain areas. But again, it's not an exact science, and Hubbard says it's an exact science. He doesn't tell you it's a lie detector, and he makes it into something magical and special that it's simply not. But at the same time, it's not complete gibberish. It can be used as a manipulation tool pretty cleverly, the way he set it up.
Yeah, but it is actually so the idea is to sort of get somebody dissociated, so there's a reaction, and then there kind of isn't a reaction.
There's no it's how to make someone into a sociopath. If you keep dissociating someone and you get 1,000 floating needles throughout your career, that's how you lose your heart and your conscience, and you can do these bad things we were talking about earlier. The more you feel out of your body, the more it's called depersonalization too. It's hard to describe. You asked how I felt for 10 years and what was the process like. It was like looking at myself from the outside in. I wasn't connected to my body and my emotions or anything. I was made into a sociopath, an uncaring person, simply by being so disconnected from myself. That's what Scientology and the MK Ultra project was doing to people on purpose. And reframing it as this dissociation, this not caring, this floating feeling. And it feels really good, by the way. It feels like a high. It's trauma to get up to that point, but then when you finally snap into it, you feel like you met God. So it's interesting that trauma can be reframed and used and make you addicted to actually injuring your own mind repeatedly.
Yes, but it sounds completely unhealthy, though. It sounds like
it's totally unhealthy. It's the worst thing I've ever done, bro. Like, it's fucked me up even 15 years later now.
So it's kind of like staring into the mirror, isn't it? For like half an hour, sort of thing. You sort of
and they even have a drill like that.
You start to see a different face, don't you? It's not your own face anymore.
And one of the first drills you do is stare at another person for hours on end. I did this with my sister, and she turned into all these different creatures. It's exactly like staring in a mirror, and that's one of the very first drills you do to put you into that to get you disassociating at the beginning.
So I kind of sort of want to move on a little bit. Got a few more questions.
Sure. Man.
Can you talk about what impacting Scientology had on your acting career? I've had a look at your IMDb actually, and I think you appeared on Life on Mars, didn't you? I think.
I did the pilot, but then they redid the pilot.
It's a UK series originally, wasn't it? Life on Mars.
Yeah,
it's adaptation.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I don't think the US version even did well after they redid the show either. But I do. That's right. It was a UK show. I remember that.
It's good. I've not watched the pilot. I'll try and find a pilot for it. Try and watch it because it's interesting.
It was an interesting show actually, but the UK version was way better. I don't think they translated it very well in America. It had a huge impact, dude. I mean, this is where we get to, I don't want to get too deep, but man, when I came out of Scientology, it not only opened my eyes to Scientology, but Hollywood too. Hollywood's kind of a cult, and a lot of the stars are under trauma-based mind control. So it's not something my plan was I thought it was going to take me about 2 years to deprogram. And then once I started to learn more about Scientology, my eyes automatically opened up to the wider world. And I could see the same techniques and the same programming happening on a larger scale. And also in different factions, from the Jehovah's Witnesses to the Mormons to advertising to television, everything. So I don't know, my eyes opened the fuck up. So when I was trying to figure out a way to go back into Hollywood, I'll get my mind back. It's going to take 2 years. And then I'm going to go back into Hollywood. I have as much desire to go back into Hollywood. I love acting, but I'm not willing to sell my soul again, unbeknownst to me. So I have as much desire to keep this really simple because I don't want to lose people unless there's other videos for this.
Right.
But I want to go back to Hollywood as much as I want to go back to Scientology. Let me just put it to you that way. So you kind of do have to sell your soul if you want to make it. And again, it's hidden and all that. A lot of the child stars and stuff grow up with trauma-based mind control. They're either in a cult or they go through something very similar. River Phoenix, for example, he's the guy that inspired me to be an actor. I saw him in a movie called Stand By Me at 12 years old. And they kind of, the reason for that, by the way, my man, is because people look up to celebrities. It's the dumbest thing in the world, but celebrities are used to endorse products and sell to the public who mindlessly follow these people. So they have to be under control. So what they look for is people like River, who have a lot of talent, grow up in a cult. So they've already experienced abuse through the Children of God, Joaquin Phoenix now, you know, also. And they're easy to put under this kind of control. So they can be told what the fuck to do to pimp for Hollywood and sell the products. I know that sounds a little too basic, or maybe that doesn't sound accurate to listeners if they haven't investigated this, but having lived Hollywood, gotten up their ladder, and Scientology, let me just put it this way. The world is nothing like I thought it was. I thought you could be a good person. You can rise to the top through hard work and effort. I didn't go to the fucking parties, dude. I hated that shit. I spent all my time practicing my craft in fucking acting class. It's absolutely nothing to do with that. I even got lucky because my theory was I'm just going to get so good at this. Like, there's not a lot I could do. I tried to be a musician, but that didn't come naturally. Acting, even as a kid, I was like, dude, I can develop this forever. There'll be at no point where I can ever go, oh, I got it. And I loved it. But what comes along with that is you don't necessarily have to have talent or anything. What you have to have is kind of an abused, controllable, malleable. You have to be a basic pansy and, you know, do what the fuck you're told, just like in Scientology, if you want to rise to the top and have some sort of career. So I'm not willing to do that any more than I'm willing to go back to Scientology. And like I said, it sucks because I need to be an artist, dude. It's like the reason I work so hard at it is because I just can't do a normal job. It drives me nuts. Even out of the womb, I was like, hell no, dude. I'm going to be an actor, musician. I'm going to definitely work hard to do something where I'm not bored the rest of my life, trapped in some job I don't want to do. So after working 10 fucking years, finally getting a foot in the door, signing with the big agency, and then waking up from the cult, I was about to learn over the next 10 years how life really works. So I didn't feel like I had anywhere to go. I'm like, I either have to go back to a bullshit job I don't like. I'm not selling my soul a second time in fucking Hollywood. And you kind of have to be a piece of shit to make it in there and like sell out. And so if you don't want to sell out and you want to stay true to yourself, but you need to express yourself as an artist, this world fucking sucks, man. And I got to tell you, I'm pissed off about that because I honestly believe that good, hard work, being talented, having a gift that you work hard on that you're supposed to express, it has nothing to do with that. So I got disabused of a lot of things, man, when I came out of Scientology. And honestly, bro, like the best thing I've had ever is simply having a small little YouTube channel where I don't have to hide behind a character and act out who I feel. This is something really important to me, and it's important to know about, right? Cults, how we can be manipulated.
It's quite cathartic as well.
It.
I mean, I assume
massively, brother, massively. Like I said, I've had more. It's hard too because you have to try to keep up with the stupid algorithm. You can't say certain words, and it's like a whole job editing all this shit. But creatively, brother, and like I said, not having to hide behind a character and just say it straight, and learning about all this shit. I mean, I don't even like social media or YouTube, but it's beautiful having a platform and a voice where you don't have to go through agents. You don't have to suck someone's dick to try to get a job. You can just say what the fuck you want, man. And so it's not only been cathartic, it's been creatively, it's way better than getting acting jobs. You know what I mean? It's so much better.
I know this is sort of like going not specific Scientology, but I was just wondering if you could maybe elaborate just a little bit, maybe. Sure. You said that Hollywood was like a sort of cult in a sense, and I just wanted you to sort of elaborate on that a little bit in terms of why it's a cult. You said it was a behavior thing, didn't you? That you have to dance to their tune, in a sense.
Yes.
You have to do what they say they do. But I just wondered if you could elaborate on that.
That's hard. Here's the thing, brother. When I'm the only ex-Scientologist that will actually talk about this stuff. Most of the ex-Scientologists have YouTube channels. They go right back to the normie world and they believe everything they're told. Like I said, for me, Now, I don't do QAnon. I don't do flat Earth. I'm talking about using discernment. I could not help but recognize the mind control techniques, the do it for the greater good, all the slogans, everything. My eyes completely opened up once I learned about Scientology. This world looks very different when you understand this stuff. And I wasn't looking for any kind of conspiracy. I wanted to go back to Hollywood. But the question you're asking is why I do so many damn videos and why I wanted to break it down step by step. Because even before I started the first video, what I have is this series called Raised in a Secret Society. I'm trapped in my house. The quote unquote pandemic hit. All hell broke loose. I'm feeling more trapped than when I was in frickin' Scientology. We literally couldn't leave the house, dude, for like months or whatever. It's like, it looked like it was just incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that put a bug under my ass. I was like, there's nothing to do. I'm not a YouTuber. I hate this shit. I'm never probably going to talk out about Scientology, but there's fucking nothing to do, man. So spontaneously, I started creating this series where I'm going to take people from the very beginning and just tell my story, knowing damn well that we're going to get into Hollywood and MK Ultra and where the fuck this shit come from. Everything I learned over the last 10 years. And that is outside of the X community in general too. They think all that's crazy. They have there's one guy named John Atack who does know about all this stuff, most of it, but he's kind of clueless. In other words, like I said, they go back to the normie world. They somehow don't see the parallels in other areas of life. So I can't give you a breakdown of that in 5 minutes because I'll tell you this. I have a video 2 hours long with a guy named Cornell. It's called The Secret History of L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology, where I break all that down. That's 2 hours just to give you a little answer to that question about Hollywood. Because in order to explain that, we have to go back to Jack Parsons and the formation of Hollywood and propaganda and stuff like that. What I'm trying to do, so I don't sound like a fucking nutter, because there's a lot of nutters in this conspiracy field. I don't even like these people, man. You have to back it up with facts and evidence, and you have to go slow because it's outside of most people's, including my own. That's why I learned about it. People think they just dismiss it, conspiracy theory, and they carry on with their life. So you have to present it in an intelligent way. It is definitely a cult. They do need people under trauma-based mind control, and most of the top celebrities, not all, have are under trauma-based mind control in a cult. That's sort of the requirement. But unless you back up what I'm just said with evidence and go through some of the stars in the videos, which I do on the channel, that's going to be over people's heads, and they're going to immediately tune out and go, "Oh, Doug got out of Scientology and then he joined QAnon," and any of the other bullshit that they say. QAnon's another cult, by the way.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're nutters.
Secret messages. About...
Yeah, they're created. You know why? That's kind of a government psyop. That was created so that people that can suss what the government's up to will be led down a cul-de-sac. So when people like me come out and say, "Hey, actually Hubbard's is based on MK Ultra, and here's the evidence and all that," they lump people that can see what's going on into, "Oh, you're just a Q nutter." So it immediately causes people. In other words, if you're a psychopath, you have to control both sides. They can't stand states of flux. So you have to control the opposition, and you have to control, it's like the left-right paradigm. "Oh, I'm going to vote for Trump. Oh, I'm going to vote for Biden." Meanwhile, control gets more and more. Nothing fundamental ever changes, and everybody fights each other, right? But they think they're making a difference. So in order to break down the freaking Hollywood rabbit hole, I would tell your listeners to go check out episode number 6 and 7 specifically on the Raised in a Secret Society series. That's season 2, and that's called The Summer of Psyops, Manson, Son of Sam, and Scientology. That's an hour and a half, which will get people introduced to that. There's a 2-hour interview called The Secret History of L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology, and it's called Scientology, MK Ultra, and Global Mind Control. So there's 2 hours just to get people's feet wet on the question that you asked. I can't answer that, my man, unless you want to go all day.
That's fine.
But it's a great question, and I encourage people to go look.
I'll watch those. I'll watch those episodes. It sounds quite interesting. I'll have a few for hours and watch those. I think you'll
like them, man. And before that, like I said, I laid out a series. So the very first episode is called Quarantine Days, where I'm locked in my house in June 2020, and it goes real slow. So you might want to work yourself up to that because it gets right into it. But I still think it would make sense if you don't have time on your hands and you just want to check out those 2 episodes. About an hour and a half total.
Yeah, I'll give them a watch. I've lots of time on my hands.
Okay.
I work full time, and and I'm not a real YouTuber. I'm doing this because I'm doing this just because I find it fascinating to interview people and talk to people. I don't give a shit about YouTube fame or anything like that. I don't care.
Good, man. And hey, maybe if you like interviewing more guests or whatever, you can do more of it. You don't have to worry about being YouTube famous, but maybe you'll like it and it's fun. As long as you don't put pressure on yourself to have to play the game of YouTube. It's a whole other thing.
I don't care about the algorithm and swearing or whatever.
Good man. I know. I feel you, man. I feel you.
I did have a few more questions, though.
Sure, man.
So, are there any remnants of Scientology that you've kept? Is there anything at all about your? And how many years were you in the church? Sorry, were you in your 20s, and then you left at 33, was it? And you were 33 years old, was it?
Yes, 9 years old to about 20. I had lots of choruses and indoctrination, but I resisted it. Around 2021, I got into it and dedicated myself to it. Lots of long story. Up to my early to mid 30s. I got out in January 2008. I was born in July 1973, and I'm gonna be 50 shortly in July. So I've been out. I was only in for about maybe 15 years as a hardcore Scientologist, which is still a long time, but I consider the other 10 years too, because so I'd say about 25 years, man.
Wow,
15 as a hardcore
time.
And 10, it's my life. It's basically all I knew. Even though I was never on staff, my dad and the way the family was run, it was all about running it according to Scientology. It's all encompassing. So even though I didn't take to it until I was about 20, from 9 to 20, that was part of it too. Bro, if I wasn't born into a Scientology family and someone came up to me at the Dianetics book, I'd be just like you. I'd say, fuck it, and I'd skip it. There's no way I would have gotten in Scientology unless I was constantly in and around it. It was inevitable for me. It was pushed on me. It's the way the family was run. And there's no way as a kid I was going to be able to resist the sophisticated techniques of manipulation my parents and the cult were using against me, unless I was some psychology would have helped. If I would have gotten lucky enough to study some psychology, if I would have come across H.G. Tudor, I could have planned my escape at 18 to leave the house.
I suspect your parents would have been very happy if you'd done a psychology course, considering what the church teaches on psychology, though. So
absolutely correct.
There probably may not have been a way out for you until you found the book that you that someone left on your God. Did they leave it on your doorstep? Didn't they? Your actor friend.
The audacity of that prick! Can you believe that? I was so pissed at him, man. I was like,
"How do you feel about it now, though? How do you feel about him leaving the book now?"
I couldn't thank him enough, and he finally told me to shut. By the way, he's not really a friend. He was doing it to get back at me. He's kind of a jealous little actor prick, But at the same time, it doesn't matter because he saved my fucking life, and I've thanked him 1,000 times, and he just finally told me, "Stop fucking saying thank you. I get it. You're welcome." He just got sick. I don't think he wanted me to get out of it. I think he just wanted to piss me off.
It must be a hell of a book, man. It must be a hell of a book for the first paragraph to have deprogrammed. Gee, Christ.
Because I also say I don't think you could just take somebody that's in a cult, go drop off the book, and it'll work. I was ready to pop. I had enough.
I see.
Subconsciously, let's just say the timing was perfect. But bro, the information is there. If you're willing, it's not that hard to understand. It's one of those. We're talking about mind control, which all just that subject alone, people don't, is it real? What does that mean? So just even understanding what that is, he breaks these terms down that seem a little weird in really simplistic psychology terms, easy to understand. So I would always be curious to see how they would react, because the information's right there. As long as you don't trigger their particular cult, which he doesn't. He only talks about the Moonies, because that will cause the programming to kick in. But it's all laid out. What is a cult? How do they work? What are the techniques they use?
It's very easy, isn't it, to look at somebody else's cult and say, "Oh, well, that's a bunch of shit."
I knew we weren't in a cult, brother, but Christians were, and Mormons and everybody else. I knew everybody was out silly. Bro, the funniest thing I get in the comments is that people come to me with a belief system in the comments, and they say, "I can't believe, I would never fall for Scientology." And meanwhile, they're a Christian. They believed in the crap that happened the last few years. Everybody has a belief system, dude, that they're so confident that is correct. It would never occur to them. That's why I'm thankful. You asked me what I got out of this experience. The best thing I got out of being under mind control and getting out, it humbled the crap out of me. It opened up my eyes, and I'd never be able to think I'm better than somebody and look at a Christian or a Mormon or anything and say, you fucking idiot, because I understand exactly how it happens. I know everybody's vulnerable, and I know you and I are not special. It's called being human. Nobody's born a bodhisattva. Nobody's born knowing the answers. We just think we do. So
That's true.
they humbled the shit out of me in terms of always not doubting myself in a way where I'm paranoid all the time. I have certain beliefs, but I'm not cocky and arrogant like I used to be, thinking that, oh, that would never happen to me. It was that alone was worth all the torture, just to be humbled, put down to size, and be a part of the human race, and know that I'm not any special than anybody, and that somebody else that thinks they're special, I don't laugh at them. They don't know what they don't know yet.
That's true.
You know,
that's true. And I think it's sort of, I've sort of alluded to one of my questions that I've kind of abandoned, but I think it's almost cliche to laugh at Scientology. It's really, really easy for someone like me.
It is easy.
Who's a non-believer, and I don't have a faith.
It's funny though. You know? It is funny. I don't take it personally. I laugh at it too, but it's serious too. But it's ridiculous. It's absurd.
When I watched that South Park episode for the first time, I was, I was like, "What the hell is that? What is this? Is this what they? It's real.
Yes, it really is. By the way, it really is. That's
bullshit.
What I read.
I had to Google it. I had to look it up on Google. I was like, shit.
Sounds impossible, right? But you realize that nobody would believe that unless their mind was already programmed for 10 years before, because it is ridiculous.
Systematic drip of brainwashing.
I believe that 100%, brother. That when I cracked open that pack that one day, it's a very special day, because I'm finally going to get onto the level that my dad knows about. And it's all secret and everything. I not only didn't question it, I was a little disappointed, because like I said, there was no OT abilities. It was just like, get rid of these beings. So that was disappointing. But no, like any cult, brother, you're going to believe most likely whatever you're told.
Anything in the back of your mind. There was nothing at all. There wasn't a smidge of doubt that this OT 3-level information that you've been given is absolutely 100% the truth. There was nothing.
Nothing.
Not a spark.
No. The only spark is a disappointment of, when do I get the telepathy thing? No, because it's just like the Bible. You can question somebody on the Bible and say, well, what about this illogical thing? And what about the New Testament? That God sounds like a narcissist. He's a jealous God. That doesn't make sense. Like, can you square the peg? It's not that you can't. It's not. You're thinking logically, but we're in something called trance logic. So we're literally in a spell, and in trance logic, everything can be made. The dots can be made to be connected without facts. So it's just like, explain this part of the Bible to me, this and that. Well, why do you believe in Jesus? Not. They don't give a fuck about, it's all explained in their mind. They just know that Jesus said it. It's in the Bible. Hubbard said it. So my thought wasn't, is this true or not? It's, I wish it was something cooler. I'm sure the future levels will be cooler than this. I just have to get through this one. But if Hubbard says it, I trust this guy. This guy has a technology of the mind. I believe that he's not going to just make something up. I have body thetans, I'm going to get rid of them. It was as simple as that. There's no critical thinking going on, my man. Now, some people do doubt at this point. This has caused a lot of people to leave. I know Leah Remini and Paul Haggis, with the moving Going Clear, he thought it was bullshit. He thought it was an insanity test. So it's not everybody, but even then, you got the sunk cost fallacy. You're so invested, you're going to continue. Maybe the next level will do it. So not everybody believes it like me, but I can honestly, hand on heart, brother, I just remembered while you were asking me that. Not only was there not a sliver of doubt at that level, once I took to Scientology in my early 20s, all the way up until I got out, I could honestly say I didn't have a single fucking doubt. I would have problems with the staff members. Maybe I would question them on, are you applying the right policy? But I never doubted Hubbard, not even for a fucking second. In the entire 15 years I was in there.
Did you ever try to do any? Did you ever try to do any research, independent research? I mean, I probably don't.
Why would I?
Probably
that's
not.
like that's again. That's like telling a Mormon, go do research on your founder. Go learn about Joseph Smith. Didn't you know he was a con artist? You wouldn't think to do that, because you already know. Again, the cult leader got there first. The programming got there first. So you already know. You don't need to look into Joseph Smith's background. If you were to tell me to look into Hubbard's background, and some people would spout like, oh, didn't you say if, you started a religion for $1 million, and First of all, there's two things on that. An outsider doesn't know how to communicate to the Scientologist to say the right trigger words to get them to think critically. So you'd have to know. It takes another Scientologist to deprogram other Scientologists. Because what you guys say is, what about Xenu? And haven't you seen South Park? Only 5% of the people know that level because it's confidential. So automatically you're not talking to Scientologists. And if you don't talk to them in their language and you don't get the concepts right, which you can only know about by being a Scientologist, the outsiders sound retarded, to be honest with you, because they don't even understand Scientology. They understand a hell of a lot more than we do in the bubble. I was in for 20 years, and an outsider who spent, a day on the internet knew way more about Scientology than I was ever allowed to know. And we are, because everything's kept compartmentalized. And no, we won't seek outside source of information. But nonetheless, the public did come across as idiots when they try to challenge me or others the few times that they would, because they didn't even know. It's just like anything. You have to live it and experience it and have it in your blood to really know the experience. You can only guess if you're just looking at it. So from the outside in, of course, it looks stupid, and the public is going to hit you with Xenu. And then, didn't you know Hubbard was a science fiction writer? They don't know the right words and trigger words and the way to speak in their language that could allow them to deprogram. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And of course, before level 3, it's a secret, so they're not going to believe it.
Exactly.
Before that, and then after that, they're going to think, well, you don't really know what you're talking about because you're not in Scientology anyway.
There you go. Exactly. That's exactly right, though, what you just said.
I did ask, were there any remnants of Scientology that still stay with you at all?
The way I first thought to answer that question when you asked that is that I would say the whole thing, because I didn't try to delete it. I call it integration, because I can never not have gone through or not be part of, I'm not a Scientologist anymore. I took years to get their gibber. I think completely differently, but I integrated it. For a while, I was trying to get rid of it, knew it's all evil. I did get some things out of it. Now, I don't want to encourage anybody to go into Scientology so they can get a leg up in Hollywood, so they can learn how to communicate better, and blah, blah, blah. There was residual effects that came from the placebo effect by me simply believing it. So you don't need a cult to learn how to communicate, to break into Hollywood or anything. What I did get out of it, the most important thing, like I told you, it humbled me and it taught me how the mind works. So I'm no better than anybody else. And that's the best part. But also the whole damn thing, dude, like it was a part of my life. We can't go back and undo our life. And I did love the camaraderie. It's so weird, hard to explain, because I didn't learn how to communicate better. Those drills were shutting my emotions down. It made me a shittier actor, which is another contradiction, by the way, and why I told you I was about ready to break subconsciously before the book was dropped off, because I was learning from my acting class. It's a long story, but I got away from the Scientology acting class and I went to the actor studio. I met this guy named Martin Landau. He's like this famous movie actor, and he was our teacher. And he had a huge heart, took me under his wing, and was teaching me to do the kind of acting I liked when I was growing up, like River Phoenix. Be real and natural. It's not about acting, kid. It's about feeling for real. So that was contradicting against the unnaturalness of the programming and the communication course and the drills that seemed to be helping me with my acting career. So I'd say almost all of Scientology's placebo effect, it gave me the confidence to move out to Hollywood to begin with. It seemed like I could communicate better. It seemed like I could take command of the audition room when I went in there. I didn't have any nerves because of that. But you can get all of that without the cult, and the price that you pay for that. I lost my family. My dad just passed recently and I hadn't seen him for 10 years. It destroyed everything, and it destroyed my mind. But I did get those things out of it where you're talking about. I believe that I did. And also just the entire experience, I'm out of it. So it's okay to integrate it and feel okay about having been a Scientologist. But I wouldn't have said that if you would have asked me a few years ago, because I just wanted to go bomb their building and suicide myself. But being on the other side of this thing, it was like the best, because I went homeless for many years. My career was destroyed almost overnight. I couldn't go into that. I kept babbling to my agents, my new agents, dude, where they're all excited. Oh, this kid's going to make it. All I could talk about to them was Scientology and the trauma. And I'm just like, guys, I couldn't even go in the audition rooms and focus. It really did a number on me. So I'm just like, guys, just deal with me. Please don't drop me. I don't know what's happening. All I would talk about was this fucking Scientology shit. So it destroyed everything. Then I lost my family because now I'm a suppressive person. I'm trying to pass the information. I had so many battles with my family back and forth. And then, but you asked me what I get out of it. Being able to have to work things out for yourself when all forces are against you, when all I wanted to do was kill myself. I couldn't see the freaking light at the end of the tunnel. You know, I'm living at halfway houses, living out of my car, and homeless for a few years, and going, what the hell happened to my life? Wasn't I just acting the other day? Like, I didn't have a family. Like, wasn't Hubbard my guru? Like, bro, all that was gone in a day. And so to integrate what the fuck just happened? Why is this happening to me? It took a decade. And so that kind of living through everything that I went through, which again, I can't possibly articulate 10 years in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It fucking made me a warrior, dude. It gave me that's why, you know, speaking out or whatever they do, they could even kill me. It just removed the fear of death. It removed fear of everything. So I'm just saying from that perspective, it hardened me up and it made me less of a pussy. And again, I don't think you need to be in an abusive relationship to get toughened up. But since I was a coward and I was afraid of my parents my whole life, and I was always afraid of Hubbard, and I always had to bow down to these people and do what I'm told and have to listen to government and authority, fucking that went away, dude, through, you know, a lot of painful life lessons. So that's what I'm thankful for, dude. And I wouldn't take back the experience just because of those two main benefits.
That was going to be my another question. If you could take it back, would you? But obviously you wouldn't, because it's made you who you are.
No,
hasn't it? It's made you who
but
you
I
are
would
today.
never. True, but the reason I work so hard on understanding this and going within is because I could never take it a second time. That's why I said I need to make sure I never join a second cult, because I recognize while I simultaneously wanted to kill myself, there was great knowledge and wisdom coming in too. So it was a double-edged sword. So I recognized that pretty early on. I never learned about mind control and shit. I found these subjects absolutely fascinating. And they're also hidden from people. We're not, if we were taught this shit in school, my man, we would be very hard to control. Let me put it to you that way.
There should be.
So I was having my mind blown.
There should be something in bloody school about joining cults.
Yeah, but if you gave people that knowledge, they wouldn't go to school. Or they wouldn't accept the state's downloading of all the bullshit anyways. So it would. Let me just say, this knowledge that I learned would definitely upset the power structure. So it's purposely. You have to learn it the hard way. Not always. Like I said, people can go pick up Steve Hassan's book, and that's a very easy gradient. But if you really want to learn, that's just very basic information. But if you've never learned about mind control, can anybody, you know, could you tell me exactly what that is right now? Like, most people don't even know what that is, let alone it's all around them. So it's not like it's totally hidden, but it's not, let's just say, promoted. You know, you're not going to hear, people would much rather have their minds filled with gibberish than anything that would actually empower them.
The people at the top of the church, do you really genuinely think are they so far in, as you say, the sunk cost fallacy? Are they so far in that they genuinely really believe the stuff that you learn at level 2, level 3? Do they genuinely believe that? Do you think that's the case, that the people at the top of the church, like, say, for example, David Miscavige, do they really genuinely believe it? Or do you think they're having some kind of compartmentalization, cognitive dissonance thing, whereby they perhaps don't believe it, but if they did believe it, then the whole world would, because they've made a lot of money out of this, and they've invested in properties, haven't they, all around the world. They've got huge portfolios of properties in like Mexico and China and UK and US, all over the place, haven't they? But do you think they actually genuinely do believe that? Or do you think that like, say, David Miscavige, he's been head of the church since the 80s, hasn't he? I think it was 87, was it? I think it was.
Yeah, correct.
You really genuinely think that he believes that the actual, all the teaching of the church is true? I mean, it's hard for me to sort of come at it from a non-crazy perspective.
No, I totally feel what you're feeling and what you're trying to, you know, wrap your mind around. Yes, dude, they really do. Now, you also mentioned the compartmentalization. So what's happening is they are so invested, and there might be that real self that, but speaking to them, but it's so buried from the pressure that they're under, the amount of time, like you said, and the sunk cost fallacy. Miscavige, dude, they really do believe it. And if there's a problem, I have this video called The 10 Steps Out of Scientology that was made by a really amazing ex-Scientologist, RIP, named Arnie Lerma. And what it is you might have a lot of problems. David Miscavige is really hard on his staff, so that disenfranchised a lot of people, but they would still believe in Hubbard. So they might have a problem with Miscavige. They do a lot of internal fighting and resistance against the leader sometimes. So they doubt him sometimes. And even then, not always. But the Hubbard thing they are believers. Even Miscavige, while he's changing the technology, which you're never allowed to do, he's changed a lot of things, added some things. He believes in the body thetans. He believes in Hubbard. He grew up with that, dude. His dad got him into that to handle his asthma when he was like 14 or 15. And it was the only thing through placebo effect, and not really, that seemed to do something. So once you get, and same thing with Travolta and Tom Cruise, once you get a taste of something that seems to work in Scientology, unlike anything else, you're fucked from then on out until you have that breaking moment, which could happen 30 years later or never. So they really, really do believe. Now, at the top, they do see a lot of the stuff that the public like me doesn't see. So they would question policies. They would question Miscavige. They would question, why aren't things being done like L. Ron Hubbard said? Because they never are. Because it's, even if you do follow Hubbard, you can't, because all the policies contradict each other. You can pull out a policy pro and against anything, which is part of the mind control. It doesn't actually make any sense. Like, Scientology is so big, there's so much to learn. But if you could see the whole thing at once, it's all contradictory. There's no such state as clear or OT that doesn't exist. It's all BS. It's all a scam. It's totally an illusion. But you need 5 lifetimes to do all of Scientology to suss that. So they're not seeing the bigger picture. Everything's kept compartmentalized, and they're going to think it's a problem with Miscavige if the tech isn't working. Right. The only ones that are doubting are when finally you get beat down enough. Mike Rinder, who has come out and spoken out, he was the head of the Office of Special Affairs. For 2.5 decades, he destroyed people's lives. So he was seeing all the stuff that was going on that we as public aren't privy to, and it's kept compartmentalized from us. But he got so beat up, literally, by Miscavige that he fucking finally said, fuck it. Is this even worth it? He was talking with, his famous breakdown was, he was talking with John Sweeney, the BBC reporter, one day.
I watched the documentary. The documentary. What was the guy that was Tommy? What was his name? The guy that was following John Sweeney around was called Tommy
Davis. Yeah.
Tommy Davis. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a media liaison person, wasn't he, or something? For Scientology, I believe.
But Sweeney had asked Rinder, on camera, I heard that David Miscavige beat you. I have evidence and all that. And Rinder said, that never happened, this and that. And then he said when he left later that day, that was finally his breaking point. Now, mind you, brother, he still believed in Hubbard, and he became what's called an indie Scientologist for a while afterwards, where you still believe in the tech, but something's wrong with Miscavige. Like I said, it had this 10 steps of Scientology, which breaks it down as to how to get out of it. And the first step is just finding that there's something wrong at all takes forever. And then when you do, it's circular logic, because the policies are built where you try to get it, you think power's corrupt at the top, so you have policies to handle that, and then it all circles back around. It gets handled or it doesn't, but either way, you're still staying in Scientology. It usually takes a huge something from Miscavige to get somebody to at least leave the church, but many, many people. This is why I skipped all those levels with that book, because I could see Hubbard was a liar and the tech was not special right away. I saw how the trick was done. But if you don't see that, it can take years to then start maybe questioning Hubbard outside of the church. They have many independent groups where you don't have to pay the exorbitant fees. You can get your auditing with other people that are disgruntled from the way Miscavige runs the church, but they still 100% believe in Hubbard. And many people stay there for the rest of their lives.
Wow.
Even knowing about Hubbard. They might even know he's a psychopath, and they justify it in their mind. Well, yeah, it was crazy. I know, I read the stuff online, but the auditing works because they don't know it's hypnotism. That's why I break down hypnosis. Once you understand auditing is literally hypnosis, it loses its special power. You can make sense of why you're getting blown out of your mind. And again, to understand dissociation and stuff like that. But many people, they don't crack open those psychology textbooks. They just remember the highs that they get, and they keep self-hypnotizing themselves in their little independent auditing groups. So it's just, there's many levels to come out of this mind.
So these indie people have gotten through the first level of noticing that something's wrong, and they've broken away.
Yes. Level 3 is where it is on that 10 steps. I'm trying to...
Right.
remember what I won't burden you with what they are, but it's like a
No,
10.
it's really interesting. It's interesting. It's really interesting. All of it.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm just trying to. Level 3 was the indies, and then, by the way, like level 7, 8, 9, or 10, that's where you realize the whole thing's a fraud. There's no clear OTs. Hubbard didn't just go mad later on. He was mad and a psychopath from the start. He lied about everything. And then the final step was and then you realize it's a criminal organization with criminal convictions all over the world. That was around step 9. This is well after Hubbard's out of your head and you see through him. And then step 10 was realizing that you were part of a Nazi organization and having a desire now to do something about that to kind of make things right. And this is the guy who lived that process, man, because he was, like we were talking about earlier, I don't get too much acceptance in the ex-Scientology community, even though I had a pretty second biggest fucking YouTube channel, because like I said, they go back to the normie world and they don't want to talk about the shit that Arnie Lerma was deep diving into. And he's very popular amongst the ex community because he had a really good grasp on the mechanics of the mind control and how this trick works. And he could explain it even to outsiders, because the question, that I hear all the time is what we started out with, my man, is how the fuck could you fall for this shit? The explanation is there's things that people don't see, and that's the manipulation that's laid in well before we get to Xenu and shit.
True. Well, people fall for like crypto scams and pyramid schemes.
Right?
So people fall for things all the time.
What do they say? There's a sucker born every minute.
Exactly.
I was one of those. Fucking
or a fool and his money are easily parted. I think, which is quite apt for Scientology.
By the way, what?
Not fool. I mean.
No, it's true though. But again, people will distance themselves from it. I noticed, just like I said in my community, about they're called Scientology watchers, where they're looking at it like a spectacle, not a personal thing. How could that possibly happen to me? Could I wouldn't fall for Scientology, but is there any other area of my life? What about the pandemic? Is there any relation to? I talk a lot about that, man, but I have to talk around the algorithm on those things. But with people that I know what's up, we have some really good interviews on that shit. So they look at this and they watch the channel and other Scientology channels and they're watchers, not realizing that they're actually under mind control too, but you don't know it. And they're very confident in their belief system. And it's like, you know what it's like, bro? A rape victim, this never happened to me, but a rape victim would have survivors from that come over to the channel, and they have a hard time telling people that haven't experienced that. Like what, they're not stupid. They were genuinely empathic, good people that got taken in by a narcissist who seeks out people that want to help, who do have emotions. And they can be captured and they'll stay in there and hang into the game forever. Whereas a dickhead or a narcissist might be more cult proof because they don't want to help and they don't give a fuck. So in Scientology weeds people out with something they call the help button, meaning if you're not willing to help, you really can't be a Scientologist. And it's a way of capturing people that are genuine because they really are the easiest to keep in there.
So here's a question for you. Do you think if Ron L. Hubbard had been born after Scientology being created, do you think he would have joined it himself?
That's a great question, man. No, because he's a leader. He's a maker of gods. He thought he was Satan incarnate. He wouldn't bow down to any organization. He would be the one to create it and manipulate people. He wouldn't. This is what I'm saying, like why a narcissist. I talked about this with that psychopath the other day where they actually can join if they get something out of it. But for the most part, unless they're top dog and they're the ones manipulating, they're not going to join somebody else's manipulative cult, not least because they would probably be able to see through it, what was being done, if they're a true psychopath. And they would be thinking about, like L. Ron Hubbard was, how can I form my own? He famously said, the way to make $1 million is to start a religion. And he's 100% right about that. It's the best sell ever.
And it's kind of weird, though, because... he said, I've got another quote, I think I've read it before, but he said the only way to make any real money was to have a religion. That's a direct quote from Hubbard. But there must have been some point whereby he created Dianetics, right? And then he started to believe his own shit further on down the road.
You're
when
right
he wrote the book, surely he wouldn't have believed it after he wrote the book.
I believe you're right. He did not. Well, he kind of... That's a really great question, and I think it's actually both, because he was not sane. If you try to look at him from not a split personality, it's like two people at the same. He would constantly contradict himself. So if you try to figure him out logically, it doesn't work.
I see what
But
you
again,
mean.
if you understand the psychopath, in his mind, it's both sides are true at the same time.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of,
No, that's
thank
really...
God we can't understand, but I that's how I describe it, because that's how I see what was going on inside of his head.
Yeah.
But you're right about that, though. He did believe in his bullshit and not. It was both, literally, just whatever suited him, because he claimed to have cured himself, with all the problems from the war and everything. Did he believe in that? I think he convinced himself. What he used to do, and I have his diary entries up. I have part 1, and there's another part coming up called Diary of a Madman. And this is the most insight you can get on Hubbard's mental state. And this is right before he formed Dianetics. And it's all based on Crowley and his guardian angel talking to him. He feels like he's being guarded by this angel. And he would get on drugs, self-hypnotize himself. And then there's all these different lines that he would write out. You're beautiful. You can sing well. You are cured from your ulcers. He put these on a tape recorder. And like I said, he'd get jacked up on drugs and then had this thing repeat back to him. And it implanted it. So he was using self-hypnosis, and he was also an expert hypnotist. So in a way, he felt he felt if I can install these in my mind through drugs, what Crowley, it's the same thing that Crowley talked about. This is where he learned it. You get high on drugs and you access the subconscious and you implant memory, you hypnotize yourself. And this is what a lot of the new age cults were catching on to too. So I do believe that he believed, if I put these in my subconscious, I will then become that. It's not true. It doesn't work that way. So I believed he believed that, and that's why he bought into his own bullshit. But at the same time, he would know he's scamming people, and he'd know he's lying and manipulating too.
And I assume you probably want to end this at some point.
I'm enjoying it, yeah.
But no, I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it, man.
I am too, dude. I don't feel any pressure, man.
Well, I did have a few more questions for you as well.
Sure,
so,
man.
Do you think that you could ever join another cult? Do you think it's possible for you, having been susceptible to it once? Do you think there's ever a scenario if you joined a cult again and it was drip by drip, say for example, do you think that you'd be able to recognize the signs again, or do you think there's any chance that you would join that, at all? I hope that you'd recognize the signs.
You guys, this has been a good interview, my man, because every question you've asked has not been the one I've heard a million times, and that's another great question. The first thing I thought about that. Here's the thing. I'm never going to say that I'm totally cult proof, simply because I don't want to get that confident again about that subject. So I can always keep myself open to doubt, and that maybe I could. But here's the thing. Once you learn, like I did, no, bro, I do feel it will be impossible. I couldn't have said that without really 10 years of understanding this, because it's really is deep and it's complex. There's a lot to it. But having understood that, we were talking about earlier with the PANDEMIC, I recognize it right away. So no, I feel like it would be impossible, but I'm always going to keep a little bit of doubt in the back of my mind about what I just said. It's just to protect myself, so I don't actually. It's subtle.
You need to.
But yeah, there's hope though, brother. That's a great question you asked, because if we were taught this in school, or let's say this is part of the curriculum in general to spot psychopaths, for example, just that alone, you really are protected for the rest of your life. You won't fall for it a second time. But if you don't know that, if you don't know what to look for, the psychopath has the advantage. And it can ruin your entire life. It completely destroyed my family. It came in like a viper and it destroyed everybody. But a little bit of knowledge, man, it's not hard to learn. It's simple, it not only proofs you up, but it eliminates that as a danger. So in other words, it's really powerful, something that could really destroy every aspect of your life. Knowledge is your protection against knowledge is the only protection against mind control. And once we learn the weapons, the invisible weapons being used against us, they lose all their power, and you are not you are proofed up against those for real.
Yeah, you've got a constant critical thinking sort of part of your brain that ticks over.
Yeah, and you won't forget it because you'll recognize your red flags right away.
I did want to sort of move on to another thing as well.
Sure.
I'm sorry to hear about the passing of your father. That must have been
Thanks, man.
Very difficult, man. Especially when you had issues with not being able to contact contacted him through Scientology because you'd disconnected, hadn't you?
Kind of. It's a long story. Yeah, let's just say we lost contact for a long time.
Okay. No, that's been difficult. Have you lost any contact with other family members? And is there a chance for maybe you and your mother to reconnect? And
great question. First of all, thank you, brother. I appreciate that. I still haven't been able to process it because it's really weird. I have mixed emotions. Like my dad, was both the source of bringing Scientology in and like an unbelievable amount of trauma that he left this world without ever realizing. At the same time, we did have a bit of thank God we had one email about 6 months before he passed where there was some closure actually. And we did have a little bit of as much as could be expected. But I killed my parents off of my mind a long time ago because I had to, because I knew that with or without Scientology, they're controlling people. So it wasn't like, I call my family dynamic a cult too. It was just a harmonic on Scientology. Scientology amplified everything and made it worse, but there was no family really to go back to once I learned about this stuff because they were narcissists too. They were manipulative people. So I tried to negotiate for years with them. They never disconnected from me. I think because they're supposed to, but I think because they want to keep a little bit of control over me. And if I leave, they don't have that. So I had to disconnect from them because they would try, and they can't help it because they are Scientologists. That's all they know. They would need to keep manipulating me, and they would eventually want to sneak me back into the cult. So the only way out of that, and again, I learned this from this H.G. Tudor guy and the hair psychopathy test. If you're dealing with a real narcissist or psychopath, they consider you their property for life, and you're always going to be treated the same way. They can't change. So you actually have to leave them. So I killed off that hurt. That was the hardest part. I cried for years, every night, dude, about missing my family, but I kept making myself go forward and not be rubber band back to their manipulations. Cause I missed them. I'd reach out to them. Then they'd lash the hammer again. I go, oh, why did I do that? Then sometimes they'd be nice and it seemed like we'd be getting along. And then bam, the hammer comes down again. So I finally learned about that roller coaster ride. I realized my parents, not just in one day after deep introspection, I was like, these are manipulative people. With or without Scientology. So there's no family to go back to. I killed them off in my head a long time ago, and I took the tears and processed all that. So I don't have all that going on anymore. With being safe out of Scientology and all that, I just freaking miss my dad. And it's almost like none of that shit even mattered. As soon as he passed, I was like, forgive them for they know not what they do. I was okay a long time ago with my parents remaining in Scientology. I knew they were never going to get out. Me and my mom have been emailing back and forth since my dad passed, very lightly, which is an amazing, weird thing. But I know she's not coming out of the mindset, and I wouldn't want. It's too late to rekindle. She's 78. My dad was 82 when he passed. He was just about to turn 82. By the way, they were born on the same exact day. They're 4 years apart. Yeah. And they have the same birthday. So no reconnection with the mom. It's been really cool to communicate, not talking about Scientology or anything, just emails here and there. How you doing, mom? This and that. She seems to be doing okay. When my mother passes, I think that possibly my sister, I have a sister, it's just me and my sister, and she has a bunch of grandkids that all got scooped out of my life too. Not because my sister was so hardcore on Scientology, but because she was codependent on my family, so she must do what they say. And if Doug's the SP and talking about it, it's better to side with the family than side with Doug. Because I went to her one night where I really needed her help. And I spoke to her openly about what's going on with Scientology and everything. And she, I think, understood it. I love my sister very much, by the way. She's totally forgiven. Everything's totally cool with her. I understand her situation. But she did kind of turn her back on me a while ago, which I don't hold a grudge on, because she had to. She needed to do what my parents said. So maybe rekindling on the sis when the mom passes. No rekindling with my mom, but that's okay. Just the fact that we can communicate now before she passes, soon or maybe 10 years from now. I did have a closure with my father, which was on accident. Thank God that happened.
Yeah.
And the whole thing has just in general been a very sad, unnecessary experience. I felt like I lived a parallel life than the one I was supposed to live. I knew what I wanted to do popping out of the womb. I want to be an actor. My parents hated that. I had to fight them the whole time. Church kind of encouraged that, so that was a helpful thing there. But when I look at the life about how simple it could have been, knowing what I wanted to do, I work hard at anything I'm into, and I had my purpose in life. I had to fight, like I said, the family and the cult and the society at large. And it was all really unnecessary because my life was Scientology made everything 1,000 times more difficult. They tried to get me off my dreams and get me to sign staff contracts. Like when I look back at it, I didn't need really much. I didn't need any controlling. I needed guidance, but I could guide myself. And it was just a whole sad, stupid thing. The acting career, I had a taste of that, but that didn't, that got lost when I came out of the cult. Scientology was a complete waste of time on one level from the fact that, well, it was just a scam. And yet I spent a good portion of my life in it, as did my dad. It distanced me from my parents, where we might have gotten along a hell of a lot. Now, they're controlling, but perhaps we could have had a relationship without Scientology. I don't know. So when I just look at it, like I told you at the beginning of this, brother, it all seems like a dream because I don't regret any of it. I accept it because it happened. I can't change it anyways. And I learned a lot. The thing is, it took me on such a different path. Like the stuff that I talk about being on YouTube, none of this is my natural inclination. It's where things led. But if I had it my way and we lived in a sane, non-mind control world, life would be so much easier, and it would have been close to a utopia. There's no reason why we can't get along. There's no reason to fight. Scientology was a predator. I describe it as a third-party intruder that invaded us, that got us fighting, just like these asshole leaders get everybody else fighting, but everybody else doesn't really have a problem with each other. They just are programmed to think they do. So my whole life, I mean, I'm 50. I'm going to be 50, and then hopefully I'll be out of here in 20 or 30 years. I don't want to fucking be around too long, man. I don't want to die, but I don't. Let's just say I'm glad not to be a boomer, dude. So when I look at my life, I just have to laugh because it's all so comical, unnecessary, and I see the parallel life that I was supposed to live, but that was never going to be from the second I popped out of the womb and I met these two creatures called mom and dad. It's kind of.
I suppose
it's bizarre. It's bizarre.
You could drive yourself crazy thinking about what could have been. I mean,
and I did for a long time, but I gave that up a long time ago. I really, honestly, hand on heart, brother, I don't regret it. It was hard for a long time because I felt I worked so hard to be an actor. I starved for 10 years, and I believed in my dreams. And right when I made it, and I'm gonna have it. Finally, it was like incredible. I didn't want to be famous, bro. I needed to act. I loved acting, like the self-expression. I needed it like I needed air. And I suffered my parents' slings and arrows. I suffered, it's hard to make it in Hollywood, period. And Scientology trying to say, quit your acting career, just join staff and, join that. So I had to fight everybody. Yeah. And when I finally made it, my parents who doubted me and stuff, they're like, oh, friends and everything, Scientology, give it up. You're no Tom Cruise. My parents are like, oh, we always knew you'd make it. Scientology's like, hey, you want to be invited to the celebrity clique and whatever? We always knew you'd make it too, dude. In other words, everybody completely shifted when I got a foot in the door. And it was just like life could be so simple minus I don't even know how to explain it, bro. Like none of that had to happen. My parents like controlling me, Scientology controlling me, L. Ron Hubbard running from all these people and creating this huge scam. His life could have been a hell of a lot simpler if he wasn't a liar and a piece of shit, if you're just honest, If my parents were just honest with me and they would have just listened to me. I know they can't because of the way the programming works, but they had 15 fucking years, man, of me crying on the phone. I threatened their life. I fucking did a presentation to them on, here's the book that snapped me out of it. This is what Hubbard's doing. Dude, I wasted years and endless emails trying to just get them to see the obvious, and them not being able to see the obvious, which would have given us a totally different life, an amazing life where we're together, we really love each other. If you could just see this fucking predator that inserted himself, but they could never do it. So most of my life was a fucking joke, dude. And if I can't laugh at it, and if I didn't get something out of it to deal with that absurdity, I would have put a gun to my head, and I wanted to, but not anymore. Like I said, dude, the world's so crazy right now. I won't swing back to that, but you know what I'm talking about? I have belly laughed a lot, and that's my healing thing. Not to take things too seriously. I was really invested in getting my parents out. That hurt. That was too hard. That's too much pressure. Mm-hmm. We can't save people from a cult. We can't play God. And what was I doing to them but the same thing I was pissed about them doing to me? and that was telling him you can't be a Scientologist. They have every right to be a Scientologist, and they take the consequences of those choices, and they can make a different choice any day, just like I did. And so I take the consequence of my choice, and I don't regret it, despite all the, what it took to make that fucking choice.
Well, it's kind of sort of remotely or sort of obtuse leads to my next question, really. So the Church of Scientology is shrinking, isn't it, somewhat? So
Yes.
in the 70s and 80s, there were a few million members, or a few hundred.
I can give you the stats.
Yeah.
Peak membership was in the 80s at 100,000, give or take. That's the most they've ever had, brother, 100,000. And then they've been dying ever since. And the numbers nowadays are, there's no more apparently than 35,000 members, including all the staff, Sea Org, and people that identify as Scientologists. So it's always been a small cult. And the reason it has more publicity than other groups that should get more attention is because of the celebrity factor, Tom Cruise especially, and John Travolta, and which it got in the 80s, and the fact that, because most of these other cults, like the Moonies and shit, they really do have millions of members, and the Mormons and shit. So why would a group with 100,000 members have so much focus on it? Why don't we hear about more about these other destructive cults?
That's
the
true.
Celebrity factor
That's
and
true.
the huge whales. They have businessmen. They have a phrase called, what they're looking for is the able people. That's another way of saying people with money, but they don't put it that way. They're trying to make the able more able. So the reason they only need 100,000 members is because they only need a small percentage of that to give them millions and millions and millions of dollars. A guy named Duggan gave him $100 million. So they have Grant Cardone, Mr. 10X. He's given them how many millions of dollars? So they have, unlike the other cults, maybe they have very powerful, rich people that he specifically targeted the celebrities. He went right after the most able, the most rich. So that's, I think, what puts it in the spotlight, the celebrity factor and the fact that it has minimal members, but it can create mass propaganda and appear to have more than it does because of the huge whales that they have.
I'd like to talk a little bit about John Travolta and Tom Cruise. It seems like the church has kind of done a similar thing to both of them in terms of indoctrinating them into the church. But like Tom Cruise, his personality is so asinine. It's he's such a bad person. But I wanted to ask you, why do you think that it's affected? John Travolta seems to be, to what I can see, a nice guy. But Tom Cruise is a complete asshole when it comes to interviews. He literally used the method of shouting people down in their face, which is, I believe it's a technique, isn't it, that's used in the church to intimidate people. Why do you think, though, that the two people who are both celebrities are so different? And how does their status in the church differ? Are they both at the same level? And I realised I asked two questions there at the same time.
Those are great questions, man. I got them. The answer to that is Tom Cruise is a born psychopath and John Travolta is not. And actually, I just went over that with H.G. Tudor. The clip that I put up today is specifically about that. And he goes into, because I asked him that too, So he's getting something out of Scientology in a different way than Travolta is. Now, in the cult, he's known as the second in command, only to David Miscavige. David Miscavige hates Tom Cruise, but doesn't let him in on that fact. And they together think that they're the two most powerful beings on the planet. Tom is very dedicated in his movie career, in Scientology, and everything in life. And he has that intensity, which is both inculcated in him by Scientology's drills, but it's his natural personality. He's a psychopath. So he has an extreme focus, no conscience, and he will do whatever it takes. That can be a really good quality, by the way, in terms of getting to the top, getting things done. He did this motorcycle jump in this new, Top Gun or whatever. I don't even follow his movies anymore, but whatever the hell he's putting out, he does amazing stunts, right? Part of that's his ego. He could just get a stunt guy and do it. But another part of that is, could you do that? Could I do that? I can't fucking do that. But he has this laser focus, which helped him to rise to the top. That can be a quality that can definitely benefit you. Because we're back to that point of not having a conscience. If you can not see your daughter in X amount of years and focus on your career, if you can throw so many people under the bus in Hollywood and all around you and sleep at night like a baby, you can go very far in this world because it's kind of set up that way. So John's not that way. I know people say he's a nice guy, and he definitely appears to be, but he's also a liar. And, he has a hand in killing his son, Jet, and taking him off his medication. And he has a whole bunch of things that he would have to unpack. I don't think it's the fact that he's gay. I'm sure he knows, everybody knows that. But he comes across as a gentleman, but that's a facade too. That's like true. When I watch him talk about Scientology or that ever comes up, he's completely fake. It's just a persona. I don't even know. I don't think he's a psychopath under that at all. I think that he is a sweet guy, but he's a liar. I mean, Scientologists are professional liars, and he's overly confident about his ability. Again, I was just talking about this with that psychopath. I felt Scientology, you feel special. And let's just say there's many ways to make you feel that way. So when he's talking to the audience or he's being asked about Scientology or anything in general, he's kind of like he'll say he's granting you beingness, but he's actually looking down on everybody. He thinks he's superior. He thinks he knows something that you don't in the audience, and that he's, and that comes, if you know what to look for and you're a Scientologist. When I watch him, he seems very phony, very arrogant, and he seems like he's lying through his teeth. But I don't think he's an asshole like Tom Cruise.
Yeah, I mean, the question. I mean, that's sort of a general question I have about religion in general, as well as this applies to the Church Scientology. Sort of priests and religious leaders.
Yeah.
They're only human beings. What do they know that I don't know? How could they possibly have access to something at a higher level that I don't know or don't have access to? And I think that somebody should
That's
probably
a great question.
Somebody should probably ask that to Tom Cruise.
Well, I know what answer I would have given. I know. He wouldn't even be able to explain that, just like I wouldn't be able to explain it either. If you would say, well, what makes you so special with Scientology? You know what I'd say to you as a Scientologist? Exactly what he and everybody else says. Why don't you go down and check it out for yourself? What am I going to do? Sit here and explain this to you about, like, if you tried this is like, let's pretend I was a Scientologist right now and you asked me that. This is really what I would say to you. And I would say it with no doubt about that I'm an occult. I would like, let's just say you say, Doug, what are you getting out of this, man? Like, what does Scientology give you? I just said this so many times to people because this has come up a lot. You listen to what you hear on the movies, Going Clear, the press. If you went down to Scientology and you got on their e-meter and you did a fucking auditing session, you would not be asking that question anymore. You would see for yourself. So we can sit here and have a debate about all the negative press you've heard about Scientology. You can make fun of the Xenu story. You can, go ahead. But until you try it out for yourself, are you the kind of guy that tries something out without making a judgment on it when you don't even know what it's like? This is how my fucking dad got my mom down there, by the way, because she knew evil came into the house through my father. She knew, like I did, something was wrong with Scientology. But the big sell was, as crazy as you think it is, you don't fucking know what you're talking about. And I would get aggressive too, by the way. Like, let's say I was really doing this. I would come on to you even stronger than that. I would say, why don't we get you down to the course room? Like, where do you live? And then I'd find the nearest org. And I'm serious. I'd email you over and I'd say, you know what? I'm going to get you a free auditing session. Go ahead. Go in there and think it's stupid. Whatever you like. And you're right to question things, but don't make up your fucking mind unless you try it. Because otherwise you're just listening to the suppressive people. Don't you know that the news is negative? Don't you know it's all bullshit? So aren't you the kind of guy that would want to know first? And I promise you, dude, I promise you from personal experience, I've been a Scientologist for 30 years. You do not know what you're missing. This man really did develop a special technology. There's a reason Tom Cruise is into it. It fixed his study technology. You will be blown out of your mind these auditing sessions. And he did have the answers. That's what I'd really say to you, dude. And you would be laughing at me. And bro, when I look back at this speech that I would give to my friends, and then I realized that it really was a con. They never called me out on it, but I could see their reaction, kind of like what you just did, or they creep away, or they would go, oh yeah, Doug, yeah. I felt so silly when I came out of this that I had to go back and apologize to him. And I'd ask him, did you think I was crazy when I came on to you that strong? Like, we knew it was a cult, but you're a friend and we didn't want to say anything. It's really weird, brother, how once you get under the spell, I felt like really
I can really see how I can really see by the way you're talking that it would convince somebody if somebody had if
they were at the right place,
if they were in a vulnerable place.
Definitely,
I suspect with me, and I don't want this podcast to be about myself.
No,
with me, I'm very much I'm not an anti-theist. I kind of used to be an atheist on the sort of level of sort of Christopher Hitchens, but I sort of dialed back from that a little bit. But I suspect if you got me into a room for the first meeting, I just suspect that I'd go there as an experiment to see what it was like. But I really do not think that anybody would be able to convince, because I'm absolutely 100% convinced that there is no deity in the sky. But my question relating to that is, someone who is and I'm super skeptical about everything. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in an afterlife or reincarnation or anything. I think that when we're gone, it's eternal darkness. That's it. Don't believe that there's a big man in the sky watching everything that goes on. That sounds terrifying if it was true. I'd rather it not be true.
But and it sounds arrogant too, like as if there was a God that would care about your little worldly affairs. Wouldn't he have better things to do than making you win the lottery this week? Or
and I'd rather somebody not watch me take a shit. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. That is terrifying. It's like Big Brother watching you all the time. That's God.
It is.
Yeah. I don't have, dude. I don't know I don't have any beliefs on any of that. I don't know what. My jury's out on all that.
Have you found a new religion, or have you even thought about going into something else, or are you just are you sort of a humanist or agnostic or something? Is that all?
I'm none of those things. How I would describe it, bro? Like the best spiritual journey. That's not even the right word, because I don't even want to use that word because of the connotations it has. I know that I don't know. Let me put it that way. I don't have any idea what happens in the afterlife. I don't know if you go into blankness, or I don't know if there's reincarnation. I have no opinions on that. But what did happen, I figured it's called an apophatic process, meaning if you take away everything that's not true, you'll at least be left with what's true, or you'll be able to see clearly. So my whole way of framing how to get out of Scientology and not join another cult, how do I find out what's true or not? How do I get in touch with my likes and dislikes? Like just the very basic rudimentary shit that getting out of a cult put me in touch with. It kind of regressed me to a 6-year-old. I felt like a baby. I was way behind the education level because all I studied was Scientology, from what you know. So I studied science, I studied basic psychology, I studied everything you're supposed to learn just to get up to normal knowledge. But like I told you, I recognized the programming in schooling. Most of what I was taught was bullshit. Not all of it. I questioned fucking everything because I was so paranoid about this experience, and I don't want it to happen a second time. So I just started questioning all my beliefs on the very most fundamental level. And so by doing that, I didn't come to I have no desire to join another religion. I'm not looking for another group. I don't actually need any of that. All I figured is that we would already know a lot of stuff, minus the way I look at it is basically like when I popped out of the womb, like I told you, I knew what I wanted to do. I was a right brain artist. I wasn't going to conform to the system. Not that I didn't try, and not that I didn't necessarily want to. I tried because that's what you're supposed to do. But I think even out of the womb, I had some kind of an awareness where I wasn't going to take the normal path. And this is the challenges that I was going to meet inevitably anyways. And they were going to teach me all the stuff that I would have gotten from what other people are claiming they're getting in a religion or by following this belief system or that belief system. I honestly don't believe anything. I don't have a belief system. What happened is I simply, this will be an ongoing process, but I think in our natural state, we're not retarded, and there's just more to life basically. And then we go through this system where we're to be a cog in a machine and not question too much from cradle to grave. So what happened to me is I simply deprogrammed, not just from Scientology, but the wider everything. I questioned everything, my own belief systems and everything. And I stopped projecting my own unconscious blind spots, and I'd pull them into myself. So my whole religion was just simply deprogramming. I feel like left to our natural state, we're creative people, and we want to, man basically is good. And there's just a handful of predators. And that predatory aspect causes a lot of us to go through a programming system, like I said, from cradle to grave, which gives us a false identity, a persona, which we need somewhat of. We can't be totally open. There's nothing wrong with a persona, but that we lost the plot so long ago as a human race that I feel like the only way out is to undo simply the programming, and what you're left with is what was there all along. So when I look back, that's what I said, my life's so absurd, and the choices I made, my parents made, and that were thrust on me were so unnecessary and such a detour when there was nothing to fix to begin with. I just needed to be left alone. I didn't actually even need to go to school. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an artist. So if I was left to my intuition, which is my guiding force nowadays, I don't need any group or any cult or anybody to tell me what to do. I know what's right for me. And I know what the right thing to do is too, because like I said, I'm not falling for all the scams around me. That's it, dude. That's the only thing. That's my religion. It's like, I don't fear death. I don't need to know what happens after that either. That's another thing. Like Scientology teaches certainty where of course it's natural to want to know the answer to these things, but I'll find out when I get there. And I just don't need to know, bro. Everything that I needed to know was just simply, who am I? What am I doing here? What is this world? And a lot of those questions got answered by simply going through an intense microcosm of the macrocosm, a version of programming in Scientology, sussing it on the wider scale, questioning my beliefs down to their core, and getting back to where I started when I popped out of the womb, if I was just left alone. I don't know if that makes any sense. That's a long-winded answer, but does that make some sense?
It does, yeah. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So you tried to go back to...
Meaning I don't have the answers, but I don't need them, and I got enough answers where I do know who I am. I'm scam-proof, and I don't fear death because I'm sure Bro, I died a long time ago, man. It feels like this thing took me to my breaking point, brother, where I wanted to kill myself. It was scary to actually do it when it came down to it, but I definitely wanted to die for a long time because I didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. But on the other side of that, it's just a grace and a relief and a desire where everything's going to be okay. Like, I don't believe in God or any of that stuff. I believe in my intuition. And since my mind wasn't working and it was so programmed, there was another part of me that took over to get me out of this because I couldn't do it by myself. But I don't say that that's Jesus or anything. I just simply didn't have a mind to work with, and my heart opened up and my intuition took over and I realized that was pretty powerful, and that's as close as to any kind of spiritual reality I could get to. And that's all I need anyways. And I don't need to know the answers as to what happens after death.
With the with Xanu. So what is there actually a deity in Scientology that people actually worship?
Xanu's not a deity.
I said it wrong, didn't I? I said it wrong.
No.
Oh, did I say it wrong?
Everybody fucks it up, but it doesn't matter. It's retarded Xanu. I like Xanu better. Isn't that? I think that's from a movie. Xanu.
It is. I can't remember what it's
Xenu. No, there's no deity. You are a god. L. Ron Hubbard was a god maker. So
wow.
He would make us. Yeah. It's literally the highest. I did an interview yesterday with this ex-Scientologist where it's called Navigating the Complicated World of Theological Stances. And we broke down all the different things. We're going to get into the atheism part, but we dealt with the theist shit yesterday. So all the different variations of Gnosticism about, just everything, right? And Scientology outdoes all of them. It's the most you could give. It's the most head trip and the most ego boost you could ever create, because L. Ron Hubbard, as I said, thought the real God was Lucifer, and he thought he was Lucifer incarnate, and therefore he felt he was a God maker. And by Scientology, he was making us into gods, meaning the Mormons are given a planet, when they leave to rule over. We make planets in Scientology. We created this universe. We co-created it. We each have our own universe. We are gods. We just forgot that power. And with Scientology, if we undo all the trauma and remember the past lives, we'll automatically have all the natural powers that we originally had. And that power is, there's no other God. There's no other force. You're it. And that's what you would call Satanism, by the way. That's a completely inversion of it's such a amazing ego boost. It's so false and it's so off the mark. You don't even have to be a believer in God. It's just, it's the most narcissistic, grandiose sense of self you could have. That's why Tom Cruise acts the way he acts, and why I had that same confidence and ego, because I knew that I don't remember it all now, but once I get up to the top of the bridge, I already know I'm a god. I just need to get there. And like I said, no other of the denominations, religions, or cults actually go that far.
No, they don't. And you don't see priests using confessions against the parishioners in the same way that auditors or the church would use
that too. But I mean, going as far as the promise.
Yeah.
Too. Like I said, if you're a
true.
Mormon, you have to follow X amount of things, and then you get your own planet. But he says if you follow X amount of things in Scientology, you will the next lifetime and here on out, You'll carry your memory with you. You'll never have to come back to Earth, and you'll literally be able to create your own universe however you want it. And you'll never be the effect of anything. You'll only be what they said cause.
That's narcissism in the extreme.
Yeah, and it's also an impossibility.
It's absolutely
you can't get
impossibility.
any more than that. Of course it is, but I didn't. These things are so obvious, my man, not being in it. I mean, they just make me laugh too. But when I believe that, we really believe that. It's such a dangerous way of thinking. I told my friends when I came out, not that they were in danger by having me as their friend, but the amount of judgment and looking down on them and not danger, but let's just say I wasn't a good friend. They didn't, even though I appeared to be. This is why John Travolta, there is a fake persona going on there where people think they're in love with them, but they don't know what's really going on in that programming, in that head. If, my friends, I told them, if you knew how much I was really judging you, you wouldn't have been my friend. Like, it would have scared the shit out of you if you could have jumped into my head. And I would apologize to him all the time, and they'd have no idea what I was saying sorry to them, because they couldn't understand just how superior I thought I was compared to them. It's disgusting, dude.
Well, you can't really blame yourself, though, can you? You can't. It's not something.
Part of it, I can. You think
so?
Well, it's both, my man. Like, of course, I got manipulated into it. My parents were into it. There was no way I wasn't going to fall into it. Of course, I know I'm a victim in that sense. At the same time, I can't blame everything on my parents. You do grow up and mature, and sooner or later, I have the opportunity to take my life into my own hands, and I don't have to keep following. So that part, I take responsibility for. Again, I hold two viewpoints. In the cult, we're taught to think black and white, but now everything to me looks in shades of gray. So it is possible, I think, to hold two viewpoints that seem contradictory, but they're both true at the same time. Like 100%, we are victims of psychological tools being used against us that we cannot be faulted for not knowing, and therefore we couldn't see the red flags. And it's quite clever the way it's laid out, and I was born into it. The flip side of that is, it's not all my parents' fault. It's not our Hubbard's fault. And there is a deep part of me that wanted that to be true, that knew it was bullshit deep down. And so you have to take some responsibility for, what did Scientology offer me? It was my replacement family. I wasn't getting what I needed from my family, even though they weren't abusive. So L. Ron Hubbard became my substitute father figure. I was getting something out of it. I had people that would listen to me. They love bombed me. I felt special. That hit a part of me that needed to be looked at, that I didn't want to look at. And so a part of me wanted to go along with it too. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah,
I couldn't necessarily see it at the time. It was unconscious, but I do recognize, being out of it, that I wanted to believe, because it's safer and easier than having to look at myself. And if my parents believe it, and if Tom Cruise is in it, it seems a little out there. These are incredible claims, but I want to believe that it's true. And wouldn't it be amazing? And so I have to take some responsibility for that, is all I'm saying, dude. It gave me some things that I was lacking within that family, substitute family and stuff. That's real trauma that needed to be dealt with. And dealing with it by giving myself over to another abusive relationship like Scientology, part of that rests on me, because even though it was unconscious and it took a miracle of that guy dropping the book off for me to get out of it, from that point forward, I was responsible for my own life, because I has the eyes to see. And at that point, I could have done what a lot of Scientologists do and still been in the dark. But once I was given the key, it is my responsibility to work it out and find out what was missing in me that attracted me to Scientology in the first place.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's fair enough. Just a couple more questions.
Sure. You're so funny, dude.
Yeah, so, and this is a really simple one. I think the answer is probably obvious, but the Christopher Hitchens once described the Church of Scientology as nothing more than the record of a successful con job. You say that was...
Oh, that's a great line, by the way. I loved it when I read that.
Is that just completely 100? Is that too redux, is it? Or is that pretty much...
When I saw that question that you threw in the Instagram, I wanted to ask you about what he meant specifically by that. Could you read it one more time?
Yeah. Well, he said...
Is it a record? Is it a record of all the best cons thrown in one package, or am I reading that the wrong way? Like, could you read it one more time?
So, Christopher Hitchens describes the Church of Scientology as nothing more than the record of a successful con job. So,
okay, yeah, of course. I when I first read that, I thought the record of a successful con job. meaning Hubbard was one of the best con artists and he stole many cons from many places. But no, I was reading that wrong. So is it the record of a successful con job? That's exactly what it is. He nailed that. Because I mean, everybody knows. What was James Randi? He called out Hubbard once. Everybody that can
what
think
did he say
critically.
What did James Randi say? Did he actually speak to him in person?
Horseshit. No,
Or,
but
no.
he's a famous person that was kind of like a Hitchens type that could see through scams, and he just called Hubbard out in a very, just for what it was, a scam. No bullshit. I think most people know that. It's a scam. I do now. So Christopher Hitchens saying that it's a record of a scam, it's 100% a scam, and it's just a record of that. And it's a successful one because look at quite a bit of people bought into it. It's quite successful.
You never really, I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Christopher Hitchens. I assume you probably
I am.
are.
Yeah, of course.
He never really said anything about Scientology apart from that. I tried
Probably because he didn't want to get sued.
No, I don't think he gave a shit about it.
I'm just joking. I wonder. I mean, maybe it's just he didn't feel the need to. I mean, what else do you need to say?
I think that's all.
That statement right there.
I think
nailed it.
Yeah, I think that's all you need to say about it, really, isn't it? Exactly.
That's it.
I think other religions are probably more complex with a bigger history and a bigger involvement in a time span of history, like Catholicism and the Crusades, for example.
Right. But what is it? They say a cult is just a religion that's been around for less time and hasn't been accepted.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask you that question, actually. I mean, would you sort of say in some sort of purpose or some sentences or some essences, whatever, I can't think of the word. In some sense, sorry, that's what I'm trying to say, that the Catholic Church kind of is a cult. They all dress in black. They all dress in black.
There is one distinction, because this question that comes up all the time, bro. Is there is a difference between a religion and a destructive cult, and it's back to that bite model and what's in Steve Hassan's book. Here's the difference. Yes, dude, I call religion mind control light. That's just my phrase. The thing is, it's all mind control from my perspective. I know any religious believer that's listening to that, they're going to know that what I just said wasn't true and their religion is correct. But because everybody, just like I knew Scientology was correct and everybody else had it wrong. So if there was a Christian listening to this, they're going to go, oh, I'm going to tune out of this. Yeah, but absolutely. I think it's all mind control and all cults. But here's the difference, bro. You can go leave the Christian church. If you don't like it and, you're going to church on Sunday, you can fucking leave. You're not going to have private investigators fucking following you. They're not going to tear apart your family. In other words, can you come and go? How much money does it cost? Do they have an intelligence unit that digs up dirt on you? Do you feel threatened when you leave? The best way to tell if it's a cult or a religion is what happens when you leave. Can you leave?
Right.
Scientology is like the Hotel California. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. Most religions, again, there's Orthodox versions of that too. If you grew up in an Orthodox fucking Christian family, you're gonna have a Bible thumping mom that's gonna probably boot you out of the house if you don't follow the word of Jesus. But that would be an equivalent of a destructive cult. But for the most part, you can come and go in religions. They have a hell of a lot less mind control going on because Scientology's and cults in general specialize in that. And you can't leave, dude. There's always a price. And I did not experience that as a Christian going to Sunday school before my dad got into it. And there's many other elements too, by the way, that make a destructive cult and a religion. But to your point, yes, I do consider them all brainwashing, just different degrees.
It's a fair point. I mean, yeah, you can leave like the Catholic Church. I think in some countries where
that might be considered a cult, though, because, dude, again, you know what I tell people to do just to cut through that debate, because it's a great question and it comes up all the time. I mean, really, that's why there's many other deeper rabbit hole levels on mind control. But if you want to cut through all the bullshit, I even have a link to it on one of my videos called Scientology Bites. Go run that group through the bite model. It shows you how they control behavior, how they control information, how they control your thoughts and your emotion. And there's about 10 different points on each one. So if you take the Catholic Church and you go, do they do this on behavior control? And you just run through them, just throw them through them all that. And if you it doesn't have to be all of them, but if it's a majority or a lot of them, that's a destructive cult.
Like
and then
a 3 out of 5 or a 4 out of 5 sort of
exactly.
thing.
Now, if you run a Christian thing through that, you'll get a totally different set of results. So it's an accepted model. It's not scientifically proven or anything, but it's based off Robert J. Lifton's Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, when this was really getting honed at to a science. It's because there is a way to tell if something's a destructive cult. That word gets thrown around all the time where it's lost its meaning, just like narcissism, but it means something. And like I said, I point people to the BITE model. It's accepted. It's the fastest way. Take any group, take your local gym. You know, are they running a cult? You know, sometimes gym memberships can turn into something, you know, and it's not whether or not you're into something. You could be fervently into it, dedicating your life to it, but they're not removing you from your family. They're not charging you to go up secret levels. You're told what you're getting involved in up front. So it has nothing to do with how fervor you are or how single-minded. There really are characteristics which you can totally find out by running any group through that BITE model.
Yeah, so
that's just my opinion.
Easy to differentiate. No, it makes sense. It's easy to differentiate between the two. Absolutely makes sense.
That's all
completely.
I'm saying. Yeah. Nonetheless, I would not want to join any religion either, because I do consider it soft mind control too. Even though it'll only check out on a few of those points in the BITE model. It's similar. I mean, you have a guru, you know, telling you to believe things on faith, and you know, if you just I even did a deep dive on the Bible. I mean, I didn't want to join a religion, but I studied everything, dude. I studied the Quran and everything just because I wanted to know. What the hell is that? I just wanted to fill my brain with knowledge because all I studied was Scientology. So, I mean, I could barely get through the New Testament without I didn't need to know anymore, man, because it's like, that's not something I'm going to follow.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of, my sort of take on it is there's so many of them. And, they can't all be right.
Exactly.
And what makes yours right? What makes yours right?
The atheists will come back. I think atheism too is another religion because they just believe in science and there can't be anything else. And if I can't see it, so you could debate an atheist with that forever. But what the point they make is, I just believe in one less God than you do. You know, everybody believes in, you know, all these different gods. I just believe in one less God that you do. I believe in science. These are all the people, by the way, that, you know, trust the science, that like took the shots and everything. So, you know, I could debate them too, but they're so certain that they don't fucking believe. We just believe in science, and it's like that can be taken apart too, in my opinion.
So, what would happen if someone like me went into a Scientology audit? So, for example, I paid the $50 or the $100 or whatever it was to go into the first session. Do you think that you would have been able to convince me to be a church member, as I am?
No. No, because
Right.
I couldn't. I only got one person in, thank God, and she left after, and that was my girlfriend at the time.
Okay.
It was really hard to sell people on it. I did bring it up to friends here and there, but I kind of keep it a secret. It's like it's like a separate life, and I knew what prospects were going to have to go through. I knew they were going to have to get through the weirdness initially, like I did, and then have the revelation and auditing, and then break through. So I already knew that it was weird. I knew my friends were going to laugh at it, and I knew that they had to go through the weirdness in order to finally see the light. So it was just, I didn't feel like I could convince anybody, because most people are proofed up against. It's a hard sell. It's hard to get someone into Scientology, thank God. But
you have
like
to
you
get
were
them
talking about earlier,
you have to get them when they're young. They have to get them when they're vulnerable. Yeah.
Broken up with, you know, that guy Steve Hassan who wrote that cult book I was talking about. He had a hot chick approach him right when he had just broken up with his girlfriend. So he was vulnerable. And that's another thing. Scientology can recruit you simply with a hot chick. That's how they got me, you know, on staff. So also base emotion. Yeah, I was going to say, you don't have to, you can see through the gibberish or whatever, but very base emotions can be used too. Hey, did you just break up with someone? Or, you know, what about this hot chick that's just coming on to you? And wow, she's overly friendly. Just go check out this course. Okay, great. Maybe I'll get laid, you know? So it can happen like that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, I don't think I could sell you, because I could tell already that you know enough. You like that little sale that I tried to do earlier. I wouldn't even have tried to do that with you, because I could just feel that this is a guy who I'm not going to be able to convince. Yeah. And I mean that as a good thing.
No, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Right. Well, I think we'll leave it there. And thank you so much, Doug, for coming on to the podcast. I really, really appreciate it. You've been very eloquent, and hopefully maybe we can talk again in the future, possibly.
Anytime, dude.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate you having me on, by the way, and giving me an opportunity to talk about this, and the fact that anybody even cares about it, let alone, you know, you ask really intelligent questions. I really do appreciate it, brother.
No problem. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, man.